I know where you can get that. I gotta find a good one.
This meeting of the Margate Planning Board is called to order. Please stand for the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Tom Collins.
Here.
Clem Wozleski.
Here.
Rich Patterson.
Here.
Michael Cristaldi.
Here.
Jim Galantino.
Here.
Margaret Gubernalti. Craig Palmisano.
Here.
Stephen Giesecke.
Here.
Remy Pelosi. Joseph DiGirolamo.
Here.
Ron Grupo.
Here.
Michael Richmond.
Here.
This meeting is being held in accordance with due public notice thereof and pursuant to the New Jersey State Sunshine Law. Notice of this meeting has been advertised in the press, and a copy has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building. All applicants are hereby advised that should you receive board approval tonight, you must come forward and sign a form which informs you regarding the timing of receiving building permits and mercantile licenses. At the end of your case tonight, please see the board administrator to sign the two information sheets. I'd like to hear a motion to approve the meeting schedule for 2020.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. I'd like to hear a motion for the approval of minutes of the meeting of October 24th, 2019.
I'll make a motion. I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. I would like to hear a motion for the approval of decisions and resolutions. Number 33, 2019, appointment of board administrator. Number 34, 2019, Brad and Michelle Beidner. Number 35, 2019, Jason and Amanda Hohenstein. Number 36, 2019, Luke and Gwen B.
I'll make a motion.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion passes. First case, oh, I'm sorry.
On the meeting schedule, we want to add a special meeting for the reorg on Thursday, January 9th. If there's any problem with the board doing that, we want to add that to the proposed board schedule.
Yeah, we have other
Yes.
things to discuss. So let's amend the,
You're going to amend the schedule to reflect an additional special meeting for the reorg on January 9th, here, 6:30.
all right, with that amendment, can I hear a motion for that with that amendment?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion passes.
We'll publish those as required, right?
Right.
Yes.
First case is Mark and Penny Nicer, 22 East Colmar Circle, Block 509.05, Lot 110, located in the S40 district, seeking a C variance from relief for front yard, porch, building setback, and possibly others in order to elevate the structure and construct a new addition. Taxes and water payments are current, and proof of advertising and notifying have been satisfied. Mr. Collins is recusing himself. He lives within the 200-foot zone. Mr. McLaren, would you be sworn in, please?
Mr. McLaren, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thanks.
Thank you, board members, board chairman. Our report is based on the application of Mark and Penny Nicer at 22 East Colmar Circle, Block 509.05, Lot 110, which is within the S40 zone. They are in a FEMA AE Elevation 8 zone based on the affected firms, meaning at the bottom of the first floor has to be at elevation 11. They're deemed complete. This is a hardship variance and a substantial benefit variance application. The background is as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to construct an addition to an existing single-family residence within the S40 zoning district. The existing first floor is at elevation 11.11 NGVD, or about 9.85 NAVD, 88 datum. making the first floor 2.15 feet lower than is required to be for BFE plus freeboard. The proposed addition will be compliant as the house is proposed to be elevated to meet the city's flood damage prevention ordinance. The plans do not indicate what is proposed for the second floor, or if the entire second floor is being added. There's a, I think the applicant's architect is here tonight, he can explain that. So the zoning information is listed below. The zoning chart is on page 2. Page 3 are the documents reviewed. Section number 3 is the variances required, and they are as follows. Front yard setback, I just want to point out that this is a corner lot with one front and two sides. So it's a little, it's a pie-shaped lot. So there is no rear yard. So they need a front yard setback for the building, whereas the prevailing setback is 23.95 feet. For the building, 11.9 feet exists, and 6.08 feet is proposed. Again, that's based on Schedule B1. Front yard setback to the porch or the deck, whereas the prevailing setback is 19.26 feet. For the building, 14.5 feet exists, and 6.67 feet is proposed. That also includes the roof of the extended porch. They did not request any waivers, but I suggest that they submit, or they request a waiver from the submission checklist, which is not submitted. Some comments, I'm not going to go through every single comment, as everyone has read the report. The unique size and shape of the lot is unique and is creating a hardship per municipal land use law. There is one front yard and two side yards for zoning analysis. The proposed front yard setbacks for both the building and the porch are substantial encroachments, and proper testimony is required to seek relief for those. The site plan will also act as a landscape plan, and that shall be followed for construction purposes and final zoning compliance. I have a question here. There's no rear yard deck expansion as proposed. Again, that's testimony. 4 street trees are required, and they are shown on the plans. The street trees, however, should be shown in the governor strip. These are just additional comments. The plans do not show the number of steps being increased for the house lift, and they should be shown on the plan too. Again, my concern is if it affects the lot coverage calculations. The extended porch on sheet 2 does not match the extended porch on sheet 1, which one is correct. The roof of the extended porch also encroaches into the front yard setback. I mentioned that during the discussion on the variances. Sheet number 2 indicates existing floor plans were proposed. They're not quite labeled. And also the floor layout on one plan is different than the floor layout of another one. So I think that's testimony. We have to know which plan we're looking at, which one's going to be built. And the reason I bring that up is one plan shows windows along the front, and I think the board really probably is not looking forward to having a wall 6 feet from the property line with no windows. Label wall roof slopes, as none are labeled, and they seem to be, including the dormers, there seems to be some varying roof slopes. The steps going into the back. On the one elevation, it shows a very narrow set of steps, but the plan shows a wide porch and landing. That should be clarified. The fence isn't shown on the site plan. Is that going to stay? Is it going to be enlarged? Is that going to go out to the front of the house? That's something that needs to be discussed. I also have some concerns because of the curvature of the road, and you're going into the front yard setback, about the stopping site distances with the curvature of the road and the severe encroachment into the setback. Other options may want to be considered. Again, this may pose an issue with the vehicles entering and exiting the driveways, as you can't see that until you curve, because the building's going to be further out. So basically, both the C1 and C2 criteria need to be satisfied in this application. I'm not going to go through the recommendations as they are written, but that concludes my report at this time.
You're up.
Just state your name and address for the record, and I'll swear you in.
Mark Nicer, 22 East Colmar Circle, Margate, New Jersey.
Mr. Nicer, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Yes,
Thank you.
I do. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. My name is Mark Neisser, as I just said. My wife Penny is with us tonight also. We're permanent residents at 22 East Colmar Circle in town here, which is also the subject of this application. With us tonight, we also have John Obelenis, who I think you know very well, and he will go through all the questions that you have in your letter and anything else you may want to hear. Before I turn it over to John, I'd just like to give you a little bit of background. My wife and I bought the house back in January 2012. We bought it as a second house. We lived elsewhere full-time. And it was for weekends and vacations and for family gatherings. We realized at the time that at 1,000 square foot, it was pretty small, with 2 bedrooms, very little room for any kind of entertaining or eating, as a matter of fact. And but it was adequate for our uses at the time. In February of 2018, we sold our primary residence in another city, and we moved down here full-time. And again, we realized, it was very evident, that the house is way too small for a full-time occupancy. My wife says that there's no place to get away from me, and I think that's a real problem. Also, we've been, in the meantime, we've been blessed with 2 grandchildren, and so we want some more space to have the whole family together whenever we can. We know we have options. We could go move somewhere, sell our house and move. That's an option. But that's not what we want to do, because for those of you who know the Colmar area, it's a really wonderful, nice place to live. It's relatively quiet, wide streets, plenty of parking even in the summertime. And quite frankly, we've met a lot of people, both full-time and part-time residents, and we've made a lot of friends. We want to stay where we are. The problem is, as somebody stated, as Mr. McLaren mentioned, is our lot is at the end of the block, and it's pie-shaped. It's one quarter of a circle, 80-foot sides, 125-foot arc along east and north Colmar Circle. The shape of the lot makes it very difficult or impossible to design a house that meets the requirements for setbacks of the planning board. So we are here asking for several variances. And at this point, I will turn it over to John, who will give you the details and answer any questions, and I'll be here to answer any that you may have.
John, you could state your name and business address, and I'll swear you in.
John Obelenis, 102 South 8th Street, Vineland, New Jersey.
And John, Mr. Obelenis, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was well done, Mark.
Thank you.
And
So
we
anyway,
got-
my job was to take an existing house and expand it. And as Mark spoke, adding to it for grandchildren, children. So when you look at the plan as it is, the site plan, and I'll tend to Roger's comments about, I call housekeeping, answer some of the questions about some of the discrepancies. I'll attend to that also. But how do you grow a house in this shaped lot? And we weren't going to build in front, also working with the existing conditions, the living room to one side, the bathrooms to the back with the kitchen, and the bedrooms to the other side. So we weren't going to expand the living room toward the front. We thought the best way would be to push the house to the right as you look at the plan. And this site plan shows in shaded areas where that addition would be. That's all the new work. Disregard what happens on the inside. The site plan sheet A1 is meant to be to show the outline and the setbacks to the street and to the setbacks of the front yard and porch and building setbacks. So that's what that shows. The other floor plans will show what is intended on the first floor and second floor plans. So we push the house out to the right toward that part of the circle, Colmar Circle. And what I have here actually, if we include this in a set, is I call this sheet A1A, which is the same as A1. But seeing Roger's comments, all I did was I added the sidewalk to this plan. The other plan that you have in front of you only shows the property line where the setbacks are. So this one, I added simply the curb with the governance strip to show that we have a distance from an actual curb to the building itself, not just to the property line. And I basically mistakenly showed that the sidewalk trees on the property itself, they're really meant to be on the governance strip, so we'd push them out toward that side.
How far, what's the setback from that corner there to the curb.
Well, the closest one, which was one of the
Yeah.
concerns, is that it's 6.1 feet. That's to the property line. Now, my thoughts were that, and again, there's no mention of a regulation about, is that me? No regulation about triangles, but if you look at the corner of the building or the proposed addition to the actual curb, it's 16 feet.
16.
Yeah, 16 feet plus an inch or two. And I know that, for example, Longport, their side triangle is 15 feet, so I thought that we're within any kind of obstructions to cars coming around the corner. So I thought, that's why I wanted to show this drawing that showed the sidewalk in addition to what you're saying in front of you.
And Mr. Obelenis is
Yes.
recognized, we accept his qualifications, he's been here a number of times. Correct, Rich?
As an architect.
As an
I
architect?
just showed it, you
Yes.
know, obviously overlaps here, there's no room. Here's the property line here, and here's the side, it's a 10-foot sidewalk that goes beyond that. So what was the closest approach here at 6 feet? This is, I should also show it, your default 5-foot setback, you know, for Margate. So we're within that 5-foot setback, but this shows a corner to this perpendicular side of 16 feet, 1 inch to the street itself.
John, how far is the corner of that deck to the sidewalk edge?
Okay, the deck, to the main
Yes,
deck,
yeah.
that's shown here as 6 foot 8 inches, but again, that's to the property line.
That's the, and the property, the concrete's on the other side of the property line, towards the street. How much?
So we have 10 feet.
Another foot, the property?
The property line,
Sidewalk, I mean, goes another foot past this line?
Yeah, I don't have that exact number. but it's
Okay,
something like that.
approximately a
Correct.
foot?
Yeah. So, but the property line to the sidewalk, to the right of way itself is 10 feet.
So,
Again,
so it's, to the corner of that deck, it's about 7'8", is it what you're saying?
yes.
No,
6,
10 feet, add 10 feet.
if you add 10 feet to that, to the actual curb, you add 10 feet to the dimension of 6
I'm
foot 8.
talking to the inside line of the concrete.
I don't have that
sidewalk?
dimension.
The inside line of the sidewalk?
Yeah, closest to the house, yeah.
Right.
That side.
But what they're talking about is for cars coming around the sight line.
Okay, well, I'm talking about
Right.
people walking by myself.
Right.
I just don't want the deck too close to the sidewalk.
Right, we don't, usually, from my experience, I don't have an exact number here, but it's between a foot and 18 inches from the actual sidewalk edge to the property line.
Yeah, usually.
Yeah, so I would imagine that this is close to the same thing.
That's why I'm saying 7 foot.
Yeah.
That's 5 and 3, 8 feet.
So anyway, to grow this house, and again, it seems to be a trend that a lot of my clients want to have their master bedroom suite on the same floor as the kitchen, dining, all the amenities on one floor. And so in this case, we made that one master bedroom as part of that first floor plan with a master bath, a walk-in closet, and a sitting room. And that's where we expanded the house toward the street on that one side. Again, as opposed to expanding to the back, we couldn't to the left because there's a driveway to the left. We didn't want to go to the front because, again, plan-wise, it didn't make sense to do a bedroom in front of the living room toward the street on that side. So the best, pardon? Yeah, well, we had a little bump out to the left, but again, we wanted to preserve that dining, kitchen, living room area. So the logical choice was to push it to the right and incorporate those amenities for the master bedroom. Part of that plan to the first floor was to create stairs that would approach the second floor where all the new work is. Again, this was a one-story rancher. We added the bedrooms and the bathrooms on that second floor, again, trying to contain it within the overall building height. There isn't a third floor. There's just a small attic above that. We raised the house up to meet the flood requirements. And Roger's comment about the stairs, these do show the actual stairs. It's 6 risers that go up to that first floor. Now, the concern about adding more steps, the calculation for coverage would be the same because we have a sidewalk below that. So even if we had 10 steps, that wouldn't change the coverage, would stay the same because they're already accounted for in that calculation. So we're raising the house up to flood elevation. We're adding the steps where required. We're creating that second floor living bedrooms and bathrooms. We're not doing anything to the back. So basically, the plan was to expand it to the right to allow for a nice master bedroom suite. We added the bedrooms upstairs, and with the bedroom count, it all works with your parking calculations. And that's basically our presentation.
Did you do neighborhood front yard calculation. So the guy to the right, to the left, that property seems like it's already pretty close to the property line. Do you have any idea where, how far that is away from the property line?
It's much closer to the sidewalk.
Yeah, that's what I'm
We're
saying.
pushed way back.
Right.
I don't know the exact number, but
Yeah, we don't have a neighboring survey of that.
my guess is he's up here somewhere. Pretty close.
Okay.
And we also felt that because of the nature of the property being a pie-shaped property, that we're not really blocking anybody's views by having that corner jut out close to
Right.
the street there. You're coming around the bend. I believe that we have adequate visuals that you can see far enough ahead that you're not going to encounter a
Right.
car. I think the 16 feet, again, based on the Longport model of the 15-foot tri-triangle, I thought that we're within, and it's not a Longport rule, that's really a highway safety rule for that 15 feet. The porch, again, I think one of the questions, to clean up the questions about it being different, it's the same porch, but because on the inside, the sitting room and the walk-in closet reversed in the real plan, it looks like the porch has changed. In reality, the porch is in the same place. The consistency or inconsistency with the plan here in the corner is that we flipped the sitting room to the outside. It made it look like the porch was in a different place, which it isn't. It's the same size porch from both sets of plans, but one of the comments was, you don't want to have a corner with no windows. Well, we don't. We have a corner with windows. It's a sitting room at that corner, and the walk-in closet is on the inside of the floor plan. So we thought that was addressed.
So which plan are we using then?
The A2 is the real, that's the proposed floor plan. That's the correct floor plan. Look at sheet A1 as simply, that's a site plan. Don't look at the insides of that. It just shows setbacks, for the corners to the property setbacks and property lines. So ignore the A1 sheet for architectural plan. And the elevations also show the window in that corner, so it makes it consistent with that floor plan.
So John, I guess one of my questions was, you're showing like 6 or 7 steps in the front now, but you still show 1 in the back.
You know, I forgot that one. I just didn't intend, because there's no work being done in my part to the backyard, we really focused on the second floor addition and all the work toward the front. That was something I'd never considered, but I think Mark might have a comment about that.
I think there's 2 or 3 steps down right now onto the deck, and we'd be higher up, we'd have to have additional
So
steps
further out
onto
into the deck, I
Yes.
guess. So there's no intent to do anything to that back deck?
No,
at that
that's
time?
there, it's very low to the ground, and we have adequate space, I think it's 18 foot wide. We have adequate space to put stairs there.
Okay.
And also the questions about lot coverage, building coverage, I believe there's enough cushion between the two that even with a couple of steps that we're not going to really impact, that overall lot coverage and overall building coverage. We're well within those parameters.
I agree with you. This is the project that you and I went over about where you needed the front yard setback.
Yes, yes. And we took it, I think, all the way around
Right.
the other side. Rather than having it, from my experience, it was always on your side of the street. But because this was a curved end, that you said, no, we gotta count all the homes, not just around the bend, but all the ones on the other side too, because it was a continuous street, was, I guess, the interpretation.
I guess my question is, the date of the front yard setback calculations is 2012?
That's a mistake. I took those measurements with the surveyor this year.
So you went out with the surveyor?
Yes.
Okay. So I want that date corrected on there, because things changed in the last 7 years. I presume that was the case, I just wanted.
John, could you tell me how large the front deck is totally?
Yes. Okay, I have my scale with me. Can you just-
Yeah, I didn't see any
Yeah.
dimension on this.
All right, so The
existing-
depth,
Okay,
I have the depth as 8 feet 10 inches,
okay.
front to back. The existing is 22 feet, and we're adding another 14 feet. So the existing is 22 feet wide, we're adding 14 feet plus the same.
30
depth on the face.
What was the depth?
8 feet, to scale here, it's 8 feet, 8 feet 10 inches.
All right.
And the total length of the new deck will be what?
Well, we're adding, with 22 plus 14, so I guess it would be 36 feet for the.
36 feet long.
Overlay fence, yes.
My main concern there is the closeness of the corner to the sidewalk.
The corner of the deck to the
The corner
actual
of the deck,
sidewalk.
is there any way to like take a 45-degree angle off of that? Like 4 feet one way and 4 feet the other way and make a,
Let me ask my client.
you know,
Okay.
I don't know what the other board might think.
Well, I'm just saying that we have,
As long as you got the roof over the deck, so it's.
Yeah, then you put a pent roof or an angle roof, right? You gotta,
You'd have to put
you
like,
gotta put a hip roof, right?
I guess.
Changes the look.
well, I have to ask my client if,
Right, changes the look, I'm concerned about it.
I'm just saying that
I just
you
don't
like to
people
live outside
being
in
too
the
close
deck,
to
and I know
sidewalk.
one of the,
People walking down the sidewalk and people right in the corner of the deck. 36, it's 36 feet long. Right.
If need be, we will shorten that deck a bit.
Well, I.
It's
no,
9 feet from the
What's the other
sidewalk.
board members think? That's what I'm asking for.
Is it what? 9 feet?
Is it necessary?
It's 9 feet to the sidewalk. I don't think it's a problem.
Not a problem?
It's 9 feet to the sidewalk.
That corner is 9 feet to the side.
Well, 6'8" plus 2 feet to the sidewalk from the property line, then a 5-foot sidewalk and a 3-foot.
All right, Rich thinks, does anybody else? That's all.
You know what, I think from the edge of the sidewalk to the deck is, I mean, it's really close to the, you know, I'd like to see it go back a few feet.
Joe, that's not the sidewalk, that's the property line.
Oh, that's the property line.
Yeah,
yeah, actually, I had,
yeah.
The sidewalk's a foot from that
Yeah,
line,
2
you
feet.
say.
All right, then I'm
It is a
okay.
13-foot.
that's why I brought this extra plan here to show that the actual, you know, where the sidewalk is. We don't show that in your thing here, but if you want to look at it, it shows it's a much bigger distance from the two. But again, the direction from my client was that this is, you know the street, which is a nice street. Across the street, they all know each other. There are, I think, 3 homes that I designed across the street. We're all additions to homes. So it's a neighborhood, it's a real neighborhood. And I know that he wants to spend a lot of time on that front porch and to provide that space and amenities and eat outside. I mean, that was the reason. But of course, we're open to, if we really highly recommend that we pull it in, you know, we're willing to do that.
Well, it's complicated to cut a 45 there. If you just didn't have the deck, if you cut like 4 feet off of the deck on that end, but right after that window, that gives you another foot or so away, and then it doesn't look strange,
We can do that.
and you still have 31 feet of the deck,
Yeah, we can do that.
Fine.
That's okay.
okay?
As long as it all works out with the window there and the door.
Yeah,
well,
you still have the window, and you're just making the deck a little shorter, but you still have 31 feet.
We're agreeable to that.
All right.
John, would you say the regular size of the lot creates a hardship?
It does. It's not just the size of the lot itself, but it's the severe setbacks. To think of doing a new house in that corner, you're really restricted between the 2 side yards, parking requirements for a driveway, and that severe building setback. It's very difficult, in addition to the shape of the lot.
Well, plus that house next door being so much out closer to the street than this one is.
Yeah.
So it was really a constraint from our point of view.
And the benefit you're making to the neighborhood is you're elevating the structure to the new flood zone.
Not only elevating, but providing a house consistent with the neighborhood, which is extra bedrooms, room for family, you know, visitors staying over and stuff. It's that kind of street that encourages the family activities. So we're offering that ability to do that. We don't think that the fact that the one corner is too close to the street, it isn't. We have that 16-foot separation between a corner and the street. I believe there's enough visibility as you go around the corner. We're okay with that. So I don't think we're detracting from the zoning. We're adding to the neighborhood value, I believe.
Did he answer all the questions you had?
Roof slopes.
Roof slopes.
Oh, they're on the plan. If you look at the elevation sheet to the left, we have the main roof slope, which is on the left-hand corner here, and the minimum, which is for the dormers, that 5 and 12 pitch. And there's a 9 and 12 pitch for the main roof line. on the left side.
I see, you see it? Where your thumb is. Yeah.
John,
John,
can you do something with that middle dormer?
I think we're going to do something. You talking about the one with the staircase?
The one we're talking about.
We've already told them.
My client told me to look at it in a different way. Now-
And if it match the width of the others, that'd be
Yeah,
fine.
I think, you know,
But at least give it the same roof space.
yeah, what we might do is, if we're going to take this deck back, we might have some freedom to move this dormer over a little bit further and then increase this to match those widths.
Get a couple shelves up on
Yeah, I think, again, I was just held to the one stairwell width, but it's certainly, we talked about that, improving that look.
that's 512 too? That one looks pretty
Yes.
shallow.
It looks shallow, but it's 512.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because it's next to the
Well,
steeper
because it's
one.
next to the other ones that are steeper,
Right.
and that's what tricks the eye.
You done?
I'm done. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions from the board? Anyone here from the public like to have any questions? Public portion is closed. If there's no further comments or questions.
Sorry, Rich, about the waiver, are we supposed to, I'm not sure about the question about the waiver.
You want to request a waiver,
We
yes?
do, okay. Can we do that now, or is that something that my client will have to ask? that?
The applicant wants to request a waiver. I recommend granting that waiver.
It's just from the application checklist.
Correct.
Correct.
Would you read a motion, please, Leo?
Sure, and I guess with cutting 4 feet off the length of the deck, we're not gonna know the exact front yard
But it's
setback, but
bigger than-
it's gonna be
it's
bigger,
bigger,
and we'll
right.
provide that calculation. Okay, so someone needs to make a motion for C variance relief for the following: front yard setback to the building of 6.08 feet or 23.95 feet, the required prevailing setback, and a front yard setback to the extended porch or deck. They propose 6.67 feet, but one of the conditions is, as I said, they're gonna cut 4 feet off the deck, so that setback's going to increase. So I'll just say whatever that number is, and you'll provide that exact calculation on your revised plans. And the waivers and the submission of an application checklist. The conditions are, as I just mentioned, they'll cut 4 feet off the length of that deck, and all other conditions set forth in Mr. McCartney's report of December 11th, and applicant will comply with all other representations it made during the course of the hearing.
Leo, the shade trees, should that be included? Because they were in the wrong spot, weren't they?
He said that was a
I
mistake.
think he said he's gonna put
Okay.
them out in the governor's strip,
I'll make a
and
motion.
that's in there, so that,
I'll second.
Okay. Clem Wazleski,
There's definitely definitely a hardship on all these pie-shaped lots in the circles around town. And it'd be almost impossible to do anything decent and meet the specific requirements of our ordinance. A few concerns of the board that have been mentioned, I think are not enough to offset the requirement of this hardship, so I vote in favor.
Rich Patterson,
I just agree with what Clem said. I have nothing to add, so I'm in favor of the application.
Michael Cristaldi,
It's bringing the house up to compliance for the town, which is great. It's a real difficult lot to work with. I think you did a good job putting it together and keeping it there, so I vote yes.
Jim Galantino,
I think Mark and Penny Nestler will, we're gonna like you having you here full-time.
We like being here.
I think the applicant demonstrated his hardship, and I think I approve this application.
Craig Palmisano,
Yeah, nice job with the blueprints. It is truly a hardship on the size of the lot, and I also approve.
Remy Pelosi,
I concur with the other board members and vote in favor.
Michael Richmond,
Yeah, I think anytime you raise a house and get away from tearing it down, it's a good thing, so I'm gonna vote yes.
Application passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next case is Alan Swift, 111 South Andover Avenue, Block 1.01, Lot 6, located in the S30. Pardon me? You are back. Located in the S30 district, seeking C variance relief from setback to deck and possibly others in order to extend the second floor deck. Taxes and water payments are current, and proof of advertising and notifying have been satisfied. For the record, Mr. Collins has been reseated. Mr. McLarnin?
Okay. Thank you, Board Chairman, board members. My report is based on the application of Alan Swift, 111 South Andover Avenue, Block 1.01, Lot 6, within the S30 zone, elevation 10, effective firm. The background is as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to extend a beachfront deck, which previously received approvals for a portion of the deck when the house was in front of the board 3 years ago. The portion to be filled in is not very large, and it has an approved deck below, and the proposed requires a variance. The zoning schedule is on page 1 and 2. And there is one variance being requested. That's a deck for the side yard, whereas a side yard setback of 10 feet is required, and 0 feet is proposed for the second floor deck expansion. No waivers are requested, no waivers are needed. Again, this is a minor addition to the application. All the other variances that have been approved and the house is built, and it's a pretty nice house. So I have no further comments.
Thank you, Mr. McLaurin. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eric Goldstein. I'm the attorney for the applicant, Alan Swift. To echo what Mr. McLaurin said, this house was the subject of a case that came before you 4 years ago, needing some variances for the construction, which were granted. And the house obviously is now built, as I'm sure you're all aware. During the course of the application, there was some concern from the neighbor who happens to be here tonight, Mr. Both, who lives directly next door, beachfront on Fredericksburg. As part of an accommodation by the neighbors among themselves, the deck closest to the Fredericksburg side was smaller. So it didn't come out all the way to the bulkhead, and it was done that way so that the boats could enjoy their privacy and there'd be less proximity of each home and each deck to each other. Alan Swift agreed during the time that the house was being built. It's now been completed, and Mr. Swift wants to expand that portion of the deck just for an aesthetic symmetry, because you have one side of the deck that's bigger, one side of the deck that's smaller. Luckily for Alan, the both were kind enough to begin this dialogue back and forth and had asked to see the plan, because initially they had objected several years ago to what is now being proposed. So, having said that, what we're seeking to do is just to fill in, as Mr. McLaurin said, the portion of the deck that was prohibited from being filled in when the house was built. And I believe, based on the testimony of Mr. Zacher, and hopefully with the acquiescence, if not with the testimony of the neighbors next door, the board will see that this is a de minimis request, is simply evening out the deck on that one side of the house, and nothing else is going to be touched. So, although that's a fairly good summary, and I summarized what Roger had said earlier, Mr. Zacher's here as a licensed professional architect. I'd like to have him sworn to put some testimony on, and to the extent that Mr. and Mrs. Both are here, they can either testify or not. That's obviously their call. So, Don, if you don't mind, please grab my microphone. And if you don't mind, Mr. Manos is going to swear you in.
Sure. Just your name and business address.
Don Zacher, architect for the applicant. Address is 503 North Harvard Avenue, Ventnor.
And do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Mr. Chairman, we recognize his qualifications as an
Yes,
architect.
absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
So, Don, if you don't mind, you've obviously heard what I had to say and what Mr. McLaurin had to say. You can just walk us through the, I'm just going to call it expansion of the deck and the area that's intended to be constructed as briefly as possible because we have a long agenda tonight.
Drawing SP1, among other things, has a site plan on it, and there's a hatched area that is in the site plan of the upper left-hand corner. That hatched area represents the expansion of the second floor deck. Presently, it's not there, and the house from the ocean looks at it unbalanced. So with the addition of that deck, it would tend to create some sort of symmetry because the railings would be consistent, and it would extend the entire length of the house along the ocean, short about 3.5 feet. The look is a lot better. It would be beneficial in terms of aesthetics. It would also be functional in terms of creating some more outdoor entertainment area on the second floor. Okay.
Mr. Zacher, while you're highlighting that, as Mr. McLaren asked, can you just identify to the board whether, in your professional opinion, as a licensed architect, the proposed renovations would present any detriment to the zone plan of the city of Margate or the neighbors in and around the house?
I don't think there'll be any detriment to the zone plan, and the benefit in terms of aesthetics would outweigh the any negatives that may exist. I've highlighted, with the benefit of Roger's highlighter, in yellow, the relatively small area that represents the expansion of the second floor deck. I don't know if you can see it from your vantage point.
Hey, Eric, I got a question.
Yeah.
The plan shows from 2016 modifications, something like, it looks like a makeover, but it's still the same, it's not gonna, no changes, like AZAC panels and decks and this is,
Correct. Literally, everything will be exactly the same, but for the expansion of that one area.
so the house is staying the same?
Correct. So, what we've really proposed here is the expansion of the deck. You've got a beautifully built Van Dyne house right on the beach. You've got an expansion of the deck, which hopefully the neighbors will agree is an architectural benefit to them. They're really the ones who are affected by it the most, and nobody else would see this other than people on the beach or on the both side of the property as you walk towards the house. But that said, we don't really have anything else, we would rest.
Anything else from the board? Anyone here from the public like to comment? You need to state your name and address, and then he'll swear you in.
David Both, 110 South Fredericksburg.
Mr. Both, do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I live next to Alan. He was kind enough to make the change when I moved in. We talked about it, and I have no objection.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public portion's closed. The board has no further comments. Would you read the motion, please?
Sure. You need a waiver from the street trees, I guess, on the beach block,
Yeah.
and for such a minor application, technically.
No. Cross that out.
Okay. Sorry. No. All right, so someone needs to make a motion for C variance relief. It's just the one variance for the side yard setback to the deck. 0 feet proposed and 10 feet is required. There's no waivers. The conditions will be any representations made by the applicant during the course of the hearing, and to the extent there's anything else in Mr. McLaren's report, but those will also be conditions, but I don't think that there are.
I'll make the motion.
Tom Collins,
Simple, easy. Glad that you're, Mr. Both, that you came out and expressed your opinion, which is important for neighbors to do. Looking at the house, the only one affected by this would be the dune, and you. And the house is magnificent. It was well built. It's well cared for. It's a nice part of Margate. I see no negative impacts on anything in the neighborhood, and there's nothing but positive as far as the property and the people.
Glenn Wozleski,
This is an extremely minor request. And the only other party remotely affected is the neighbor who has stated he has no objection. So neither do I. I vote in favor.
Rich Patterson.
This is so minor, I'm sorry you had to go through this to come before the board, but you did. But agreeing with the prior members, I approve the application.
Michael Cristaldi.
I see it as a hardship as you have a beautiful home on the beach and you can't see the water because of a sand pile in front of you. You've got to come in front of the board to build a deck so you can see the ocean. I definitely vote yes on this.
Jim Galantino.
It's a beautiful house that the Van Dyne built you. I think this will complement it nicely. I vote yes.
Craig Palmisano.
I agree with the application.
Michael Richmond.
I think aesthetically it actually adds to the property, so I'm going to vote yes.
Application passes 7-0.
Next case, Stuart and Jennifer Leon, 9705 Atlantic Avenue, Block 31.02, Lot 19.02, located in the multifamily district, seeking C variance relief for the third floor deck, third floor habitable area, possible interpretation, and possibly others in order to construct a third floor deck. Taxes and water payments are current, and proof of advertising and notifying have been satisfied. Mr. McLarnin?
Thank you, Board Chairman, board members. My report is based on the application of Stuart and Jennifer Leon at 9705 Atlantic Avenue, Block 31, Lot 19.02, which includes an hour formal Lot 17.02. It is within the MF zone. And of course, with our MF zone requirements, if you build a one or two family home, you have to abide by the single family requirements. So this is a substantial benefit variance. It's not a hardship variance. The background is as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to construct a new flood-compliant single-family dwelling with variances being requested for items addressed below within the MF zone. The existing structure is to be raised. The site is located within the MF or multifamily zone. The proposed use is single-family, and therefore the S30 zoning rules apply as per Schedule B1. The zoning chart is on page 2. And again, I contrast the S30 zoning requirements and the multifamily requirements and the existing and proposed, and indicate whether a variance is required or not. So page 3, I indicate the documents reviewed to conduct the zoning analysis. Section 3, the variance is required are as follows. Third floor area. Whereas by definition, a half story is 50% of the floor immediately below, or else is that it is a third floor and the half story proposed exceeds half of the floor area below. Third floor decks, whereas third floor decks are not permitted in this location and one is proposed. Waivers requested, no waivers have been requested. Comments, the areas within the MF zoning district and the proposed mostly resembles the S30 zone based on lot size and use. Therefore, that's indicated on the section attachment 4:1, section B1, indicates that MF zone shall use the chart to the left for single-family uses. The minimum side yard setback for residential use for the existing lot width is 8 feet. 8 feet is proposed, so a variance is not required. Comment number 3, building coverage for this lot is permitted to have 37% building coverage since the lot is 3,643.25 square feet, or 1,348 square feet of building coverage. 34% is the proposed building coverage, or 1,238.71 square feet, which allows a half-story to be 619.4 square feet. However, the second floor is proposed to be 1,100 square feet, which would yield a 550 square foot half-story. However, a half-story of 619 square feet is proposed, which is 61% of the floor below, making this a third floor, which is not permitted by definition. The intent of the ordinance is to have any half-story be in scale with the building proposed. The ordinance also states in Schedule B1 that, in quotations, in the case of non-conforming second floors, the half-story shall be based on the maximum second floor for which would be permitted by principal building coverage. Therefore, the half-story can only be what half of the maximum second floor can be when the second floor exceeds the allowable area. Got all that? No. All right, good. The front yard landscaping and total landscaping requirements are being met. A planting strip is shown to contain two street trees, which are in compliance with the master plan. The applicant shall provide proposed grades for the sidewalk. No easements are shown. Again, these lots have been consolidated. There is a plan that indicates that they have been consolidated, so it is one larger lot. Again, the third floor deck is proposed in a zone where third floor decks are not permitted, but right across the street, they are permitted. I really have no other comments on this one.
Mr. Chairman, McLaurin, ladies and gentlemen, we agree with everything in Mr. McLaurin's report. And this is a really interesting case for a number of reasons. So what the applicant has done is they've designed a much smaller house than they could otherwise have. But they want a bigger third floor than they can otherwise have based upon this footprint. And what Mr. Weiss, who's here, is going to testify, has done is to not max out the footprint, which would give a maxed out second floor, which would allow them to build the third floor they want, in order for the applicant to take advantage of some light air and open space. Because as you can see from this exhibit, we've got a fairly, I want to call it urbanized section of Margate, where the surrounding properties to this one are bigger with third floor and rooftop decks, bigger with a rooftop deck, and all along the front, bigger with rooftop decks. Mr. and Mrs. Leon aren't proposing a rooftop deck, obviously. What they're proposing is a third floor deck in an area where they're surrounded by third floor decks, and a larger third floor, which if Pete maxed out the footprint, would give them almost exactly what they want. But the location, being as close to the boardwalk, the beach as they are, and as close to a couple of big buildings, which they don't like, so they can have some outdoor space, it's important to make the house slightly smaller, but the outdoor space, as you can see on the plans, slightly bigger. So if you look at Roger's zoning chart, front yard landscape area in an area where there's none is significantly over. Overall landscaping in an area where there's no landscaping is significantly over. Because they want to try to make their little section here, which is surrounded by buildings that are significantly larger, as nice and open as possible. But by doing so, obviously, that triggers the variance for the third floor deck, which, if this were across the street, would be allowed by right, and the size of the third floor, which if Pete designed a bigger house for the footprint, would be by right. So the question becomes, based upon a number of factors, do the benefits of the design for the Leons outweigh the detriments? We certainly think they do. So having said that, I'm going to ask Mr. Weiss to come forward and be sworn by Mr. Manos, so he can walk us through the design. And I would ask everybody, this is one of those cases where it's really important to look at the surrounding properties, and Pete prepared a really good exhibit. If you look at everything that surrounds this house, this will be the once built, smallest, least obstructive house, period. It's just unlucky for the Leons that it's surrounded by, as everyone knows in the area, the two yellow cars that are generally parked out front, the building next door, which has the rooftop deck, and they're really kind of tucked in an area where once this is built, they can have a smaller footprint, but some more open outdoor space, which is greatly important because the proximity to the beach there it's like about a block away, a little more. All right, Mr. Weiss, if you don't mind.
Sure, Mr. Weiss, just your name and address for the record.
Peter Weiss, 101 North Washington Avenue, Margate.
And you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
And will recognize his qualifications as
Yes,
an
we will.
architect? Okay.
Pete, you've been sworn, you prepared the plans, you heard what we had to say, and you saw Roger's report. We've been working on this for quite a while. Just walk us through the house you designed and the idea of taking less house space, but keeping more outdoor space to give the Leons a beach house, which is exactly what they want, a beach house, not an enclosed cookie cutter 2.5-story house.
Okay, so currently the site is vacant. It was previously occupied by a duplex. It's facing Atlantic Avenue. What we proposed is a, well, 3-story house. There's parking and storage on the ground floor. The first floor is basically living space. Second floor is bedrooms, with an added wraparound deck which goes across the entire front of the building and then down the entire left side of it, which kind of goes to the crux of this third floor deck, or third floor area issue. And then the whole third floor is the master suite. So the second floor as it's designed is 1,100 square feet. If we had maxed out this building, which is, you know, what most people tend to do, we could have had 1,348 square feet. So it's basically 250 square foot less than we could have put on the site based on the coverage.
And I'm going to stop you for a second. Had you done that, would the third floor now be a variance?
No. So, I mean, the third
Pete,
floor,
Is it smaller because you have that deck there? Is that what happened?
well, primarily, yes.
So if you made that bigger, you're losing the deck on the side of the house?
Correct.
Right.
Right, and the decks, the Leons wanted to be able to take advantage of sunsets, because you can see the building next door is 2 stories, there's kind of a slot of space behind it, so they wanted to be able to, you know, get some light and air from the west side. So yeah, so as far as the third floor variance goes, I mean, there's 2 ways to remedy that. You know, one would be to make the third floor smaller, but the other would be to make the second floor bigger. So then we're asking essentially permission to not have a larger second floor, because obviously we could do that, but if we do that, then our third floor is proportionally smaller.
We get into a situation, Mr. Weiss, correct me if I'm wrong, where by trying to accommodate the restrictions of the lot and not max everything out, because we're over on landscaping, we're providing off-street parking, obviously. By doing that, it actually works against us, because now the third floor, second and a half floor, however you want to call it, must be smaller by definition because the second floor is smaller.
Correct.
In addition to the size of the third floor, Mr. and Mrs. Leon are also asking for a third floor deck, correct?
Yes.
If this property were across the street, would we be here for a variance?
No.
It would be by right
Yes.
to have a third floor deck on the beach floor.
Yes.
Approximately how wide is it across Atlantic Avenue?
I'm pretty sure Atlantic Avenue is 100 feet wide.
So but for that change on Atlantic Avenue, at least here for 1 variance and not for 2.
Right.
And the property next door on your well-prepared diagram has rooftop decks, correct?
Yes.
And we're not proposing a rooftop deck, just one on the third floor.
Right.
Peter, on that third floor deck in the rear, is that for the air conditioners?
There is,
There's a rear deck?
Well, yeah.
There's a rear and front deck, correct? But that's not really a rear deck.
Well, that's a platform. I mean,
That's for air conditioners?
yes,
Okay.
that's become pretty common practice in the last couple of years.
Mr. Weiss, you've spent a lot of time working on this. I know we've gone around with many iterations. In your professional opinion, does this design create a substantial benefit for the zone code of the city of Margate and the New Jersey Municipal Land Use?
Yeah.
And could you see any detriments associated with this design if the board were kind enough to grant it to Leon?
No.
Eric, one question. So Pete indicated it was an old duplex, and it had very limited parking, so you're benefiting the neighbor, because I don't see another single-family house within like maybe 1,000 feet, maybe even more. If you look down maybe Monroe, you'll see a house, single-family house. But they're all multifamily, they're all tons of parking, and so you're increasing the parking by what, 2 spaces? That's what I'm asking.
I don't really know what was there before.
But,
The lot
As far as
next door
parking
was,
goes.
4 spaces are proposed. So you're going to have 4 off-street parking spaces and a single-family house, which will be a reduction in density, as you said, Mr. Galantino, in an otherwise very dense area of town, especially across the street. And I don't know how much denser you can get. You've got a high-rise directly across the street. To the left and to the right, you've got a multifamily complex. So the Leons could have done a multifamily here, but look, this is where they're gonna live. And they wanted to have a house with a lot of deck space and open air space, just so they could enjoy the property. But had they wanted to max it out truthfully, they could have done a multifamily dwelling, which, you know, they don't want that. They wanna live there themselves. If kids, and, you know, it's a family house, not something that's an investment property that they're gonna keep and, you know, rent out. They're gonna have their life on that house. And Jennifer's gonna testify to that just for a second, if the board's done with Mr. Weiss.
Just a quick question for clarification. You're basically saying that you reduce the second floor square footage?
Well,
So
we
you gain
felt-
100 square feet on the third floor?
I'll
Is that it?
say it again.
Basically, you reduce the second floor square footage to gain just 100 feet on the third floor. Is that about right? 100 square
Yeah,
feet?
yeah, it's 100 some odd, yeah.
It's vacant now, you said,
The-
property?
Yes.
So the lot, when the Leons
Torn
walked in,
down.
there were two
It's
lots
torn
that
down.
were combined into one, and then the house has since been torn down.
Okay.
Yeah, it's within the last couple of weeks, I believe.
If I may, I'd like to.
Larry,
Oh, yes, Mr. Gillespie.
one thing that hasn't been mentioned here, if you just simply reduce the third floor to equal half of the second floor, you wouldn't be asking for a variance.
That's correct.
The third floor is rather generous.
It is. But as Pete said, if he made the second floor as big as he could, we were not asking for a variance on that then. I guess it's one
I
of
think
these.
that's skirting the issue.
Well, no, it's pick your poison. Do you want to have a smaller house with more outdoor deck space, or a bigger house with less outdoor deck space that doesn't need the variance? Here, we went for the variance, knowing that it was a little bit of a challenge, but the house is overall smaller. So yes, we could make the third floor smaller, and the board always asks the same question: could this house be built without a variance? And the answer is always yes. Almost every house can be built, unless it's a weird, you know, shaped lot, or there's something about the, you know, neighboring property that makes it difficult to construct. But every house technically on a buildable lot can be built without a variance. We just think this is a better planning alternative based upon not wanting to max out the size of the lot. And what you're getting is extra off-street parking, extra landscaping. It probably will be the only landscaping along that street for quite some time, and a reduction in height from, you know, what's next door. It's, as we say, it's an overall, we believe, better plan of development than if we built by right. But to answer your question, if the third floor were smaller, we wouldn't need a variance. That is correct. May we put Mrs. Leon on?
Pardon me?
Mr. Chairman, may we put Mrs. Leon on to testify?
The applicant.
Unless you have questions for Mr. Weiss.
No, yes, you
Okay.
can,
Jennifer, how are you?
Good.
All right.
Ms. Leon, just state your name and address for the record.
Jennifer Leon, 863 Winter Road, Rydell, Pennsylvania,
And you swear-
19046.
And you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Jennifer, you've been sworn in. We've been talking about this for quite some time. Why don't you explain to the board what you told Pete to design and why it's important to you to have the outdoor space versus maxing out the house to be a cookie cutter 2.5-story house?
Well, we are lovers of the shore. We love the air, we love the sky, we love the sun, we love the full moon, and we want to be able to fit our growing family, but the outdoor space and being able to enjoy all that from every angle, have sun streaming in from every angle, was always just something that we dreamed of.
And as you heard, we talked about this quite a bit, you could have had the house bigger on the second floor, right?
Yes.
Tell us why you didn't want to do that, but you wanted to have more deck space versus more indoor closed space.
Well, to repeat a little bit, it was to allow the sun, not as much building on the side of the house, and to allow the sun to come in from the sunset side, I guess is considered the west side. And I felt that even the roof and everything, we're trying to keep the deck open, to have things come through and light come through, and to be able to sit out there and enjoy the sunset, or enjoy maybe a view of the sky, I know for sure, but maybe a view of a beach somewhere that way or that way. But we love the sky anyway, the sky,
And
day or night.
your intended use of this, you're gonna live there, correct?
Yes,
And you're gonna have your family living there?
yes.
And tell us how many people are in your family?
We have a growing family. We have 3 grown children. One got married in 2018. We are residents of Margate now, and, you know, always knew that we might need more space to have our family with us in summertime, sometimes in the wintertime, sometimes in the fall, to enjoy everything that Margate has to offer.
Does the board have any questions for Mrs. Whaley?
So you're a full-time Margate resident?
Not a full-day, no, not a full-time Margate resident. But we do come down all year round.
You would say you're a year-rounder, but not a full-time?
Yes, a year-rounder for sure, yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So based upon Pete's testimony and based upon Roger's review, we do believe that the plan as presented, and ultimately if this is approved, the house it's built, will be a better design alternative than what otherwise could be built by right. And it may not always be the case, but in this instance, and I really want to address what Clem said earlier, if you look at what surrounds this property, this really will be a de minimis construction impact on everybody else in the area. And you're really limiting the density, you're increasing parking, and I would be hard pressed if any of you could actually come up with a legitimate reason why this variance would be worse than what's built by right. And with that, unless the members of the public have anything to say, we rest.
If there's nothing from the board.
Well,
is
you
there
know,
any-
it's pretty,
Go ahead,
not to
go
cut
right
you
ahead.
off, is if you had to follow the MF zoning standards for this building, you'd lose that half story.
Right, but we'd have an additional unit there, so we'd have less height, but more density.
But I'm just pointing out the irony of the MF zone.
Oh, right.
You're
Yeah.
building a single-family home, but if you're building a 3-unit place, you lose a half a story. Doesn't make sense.
Well, we never said that the zoning code made sense. That's for all of you to take into consideration.
You were thinking it, Eric, I
I
can
was-
see it.
I mean, there's, you know, you're doing more in your landscape area than you're required to. Your building coverage is a little less than what's required. And your front yard landscaping is 9% more than what's required. And, you know, we're always talking about mass and, you know, walls going straight up and all that stuff. And, you know, by bringing that deck on the left side in, I just like the design.
I agree, Ms. Richmond, and interestingly, when the Leons first contacted me, I looked at the plan and said, what are you doing? You can do so much more. And the response was, this isn't about more, it's about what we want, which is unfortunately a variance case, but it's less than they could do by right, which is kind of an oddity. Usually you were here talking about a different aspect of one or two of these that, you know, you're way under or way over. We're, you know, fairly close if they wanted to max out, but, you know, good for them, they don't want to do that.
Anyone here from the public have any questions, comments? Public portion's closed. Would you read a motion, please?
Yes. Someone needs to make a motion for C variance relief for the following. Third floor area, where by definition, the third half story has to be 50% of the floor immediately below it, and they're exceeding that. And to permit a third floor deck where we don't permit them at this location. And the conditions will just be any representations the applicant made during the course of the hearing and any conditions in Mr. McCarnan's report not otherwise addressed.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Tom Collins,
Very interesting. I think Mr. Richmond hit the nail right on the head. Peter Weiss, you really designed a really good house with the Leons based upon the location and where you're at. It's very unique. Your surroundings are very unique. You have no negative impacts because of what's all unique around you. The positive criteria are really you're improving the neighborhood, you're improving the landscape, you're improving the parking. You're improving air and open space in an area where it's really tight to get air and open space. I think you've all done a magnificent job, and I see nothing wrong with this. I vote in favor.
Clem Osleski,
As I see it, all the good things that could come about from this project would remain the same if that third floor was reduced in size to meet the ordinance. I haven't heard any justification specifically addressing, justifying a variance for increasing that size. As I understand the zoning rules under which we work, no variance should be granted when merely the purpose of the owner is advanced, and that's what it is with this third floor. And I don't see where, again, just the third floor being expanded, I don't see where that gives any benefit to the community. I don't have a problem with the rear deck, but I have a problem with the size of the third floor. I vote no.
Rich Patterson,
The third floor deck, I don't have a problem with it. It would be almost punitive not to allow them to have a third floor deck with the decks higher than this deck surrounding them. I am dead set against expanding the third floor beyond 50%, and I could poke some holes in Eric's arguments, some of his arguments. But Roger said the third floor should be in proportion to the second floor. It wasn't just a matter of square feet. But if you look at this house, I'm just scaring you, Eric. Where that deck is, there's roof over that deck. So proportionally, it is as if that 6-foot deck was where you would expand the second floor. And I think it's a much better case to have the second floor smaller and have those outside decks. It does bring, just seeing those decks there brings down the mass of the house. The fact that it's one house instead of two, I can't vote for it because that's the reason, but I think it's a tremendous reason. But I think in this case, and very few cases, I will vote yes for this application.
Michael Cristaldi,
The third floor decks I'm fine with. I think they're great with the fire escape reason. The mass on the property, I think, is what we've been trying to fight to try to keep down. I think keeping the building in is doing it, and in the area it's in, I think it's going to be an improvement for that area. I vote yes on the application.
Jim Galantino,
You have to get a yellow car.
He doesn't want the yellow car.
No, the attorney made a good case for the substantial improvement for the area. I mean, it's a multifamily area, and everybody's going to be towering over them. Every building out there is 40 feet or better. And just that alone, I would grant this. I said yes.
Craig Palmisano,
I'm fine with third floor decks all the time. It's a very a stark looking street there, and I think your improvements to that street will benefit the city of Margate. The greenery, it is a little bit over, but it was presented nicely and well put by the architect and the attorney. I'm going to approve it.
Michael Richmond,
Yeah, like I said before, I think that the way this thing is designed with the porch on the side is a benefit to the neighborhood, not a detriment. And I think it's a benefit to the city of Margate. So I'm going to vote yes.
application passes 6-1.
Thank you. Good luck.
Next case is Orlando Elise, oh, I'm sorry. Ori and Elise Bybush, 8807 Fulton Avenue, Block 718, Lot 1.01, located in the S40 district, seeking C variance relief for top-of-plate height and possibly others in order to construct a new single-family home. Taxes and water payments are current, and proof of advertising and notifying have been satisfied. Mr. McLarnin?
Thank you, Board Chairman, board members. I'll be brief on this. As you recognize the address, they've been here before on September hearing for a similar application. Background is as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to construct a new single-family dwelling on the bay at 8807 Fulton Avenue. The S40WF zoning district has some provisions that differ from the standard S40 zoning provisions due to the riparian portions of the properties creating a hardship. One variance is requested. The lot was part of a subdivision which enlarged the subject property due to the size of the adjacent property, although it still conforms for bulk standards. A similar application was denied its approvals by the planning board in September 2019. Substantial revisions have been made for the new application, which greatly reduces the variance number, volume, whatever you want to call it. Page 2 is the zoning chart. Page 3 are the documents reviewed. Section number 3 on page 3 is the variances required or requested. And the one is building height, whereas the maximum permitted building height from first floor to roof peak is 30 feet with conditions, and the conditions are not being met. This is section 175, attachment 4, schedule B1, and section 175-32E, parentheses 5. No waivers have been requested. My comments are as follows, and I'll keep it brief. A height variance is required as the variance is not for the top plate distance of 20 feet. The plate height is shown to be 22.2 feet, where 20 feet is required. That is a condition that is not being met to go to 30 feet of a roof height versus 28 feet. Therefore, a height variance is required. This still remains a C variance as opposed to a D6 variance. I'm not going to go through all the other comments. Again, this compares this application to the previous application, and all the other variances have gone away. Just want to point that out. And I'm going to turn it over to the applicant at this point in time. And I'll be chiming in as necessary. Eric?
And Eric, just real quick before you start, and Roger alluded to it, I'm sure you will, there was a prior application that was here that was denied. The law says you don't get a second bite if you file the identical application. This is, we don't really even need to get into discussion. This is substantially different. They've eliminated several variances. So this is a new application that can proceed. If we need to have any more discussion on that, we can, but I just want to put that on the record.
Thank you. I was going to walk through
Yeah.
kind of the history of where we started and where we are now. So the board will remember that initially when this application first came in, there were 11 variances that were requested. The applicant, its architect and engineer, working in conjunction with Mr. McLarnin, got that to 4 at the September meeting. We eliminated many of those other potential variances to make the house come more into compliance. Just the prospect of coming in for the meeting changed the application considerably. And Roger did push back on a couple things, which we appreciate because it kind of put the design in a little bit of a better direction. So we went from 11, they were cut down to 4, and at the last application, the last time we were here at the meeting, that application was denied, I believe primarily because there were some issues regarding the deck height and the massing of the house didn't really please the board. The applicant, being considerate of what we went through to get here, put the house with his architect and engineer fully into compliance, with one exception now, which is the plate height above 20 feet for the waterfront zone, the S40 waterfront. So, considering that if this were a 2 1/2 story house, the mass of the house would be larger, 2.5 stories is allowed. If the plate height was lower, the mass of the house could be larger. But we're asking for the plate height to be slightly higher, which will have zero aesthetic change from what's allowed by right to what they're going to build. The change of the house to the plate height being higher is interior only. And there'll be some exhibits that I think we're going to pass around in a minute to show the difference between plate height at 20 versus plate height at 22.2, and the external view of the house, which I'm going to hand around now. I posit that when you look at this, the plate height being higher has no difference on what the envelope of the house looks like. And that's very important because we talk about massing and the goal, Mr. McLaurin and I have discussed this at great length, the goal in the plate height restriction is for the mass of the house to perhaps not look so overwhelming, for lack of a better word. If you really take a close look, and Mr. Barnhart, who does this for a living, is going to testify, all he does is look at houses like this. You can't tell the difference from the street what this is going to look like with the plate height at 22.5 versus at 20. We believe that what we're proposing, again, is a better planning alternative. I'm sure you're going to have questions such as, this lot is oversized, why do you need variances at all? Well, I have a good answer for you, which is the lot is not even close to being maxed out on what could be built there. And if you look at Roger's zoning chart, most specifically, building coverage is under in an extraordinary amount, okay? Front yard landscape, which is really the only view people are going to have, is over in a fairly extraordinary amount. We meet everything else now that the house has been redesigned, but the plate height. So please keep an open mind as we make this presentation, because the last time we were here, there were some deck height issues. They've been eliminated. There were some landscaping issues. They've been eliminated. There was a pool proximity issue, which has been eliminated. Just about everything that was problematic, but for the plate height, has been eliminated. And we think that the plan being presented, that's passed around, is a better alternative, again, to what we could build by right.
How much is the plate height higher than it's allowed to be?
If we want to go to 30 feet, it's 2.2 feet higher.
So what is the reasoning for that?
To have higher ceiling height on the first floor,
Okay, so what is the ceiling height going to, proposed ceiling height on the first floor?
12 feet.
How about the second floor?
What's the second floor?
9. 9.
Okay, so if you didn't get the plate height, how would that affect the heights of the ceiling? The first floor would be what?
Should we get everyone sworn in so they can
Yeah.
answer some of these questions, maybe?
Mr. Richard, I just want to make sure that they're sworn for the
Oh,
record.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, I guess we can start with Steve, if you don't mind. Okay.
Just state, and if you know who's definitely going to speak, if you want to swear everyone in together, you can too. It doesn't matter to me.
He's got to testify as a majority. Yeah, he has to.
In case you need to chime in on something, each of you state your names and addresses or business address for the record, and I'll swear all three in together.
Brett Harmon, 1225 North 7th Street, Philadelphia, PA.
I'm Stephen Black, Harmon Deutsch Oler Architects, 1225 North 7th Street, Philadelphia. Yeah.
John Barnhart, Arthur Ponzio Company and Associates, 400 North Dover Avenue, Atlantic City.
All right, and John's been here, such professional engineer and planner. We accept his qualifications, and I know each of you were here a few months ago.
Right, we still accept your qualifications.
You're each architects, is that?
I am.
Okay, so Brett Harmon.
Yes, sir.
Architect. Mr. Black, you were the designer, is that?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay.
And just for the record, Mr. Manis, Mr. Harmon's licensed in the state of New Jersey, so to the extent the plan's stamped with a New Jersey stamp, we're good to go.
So anyway, getting back to my question, so the reason for the...
Speak into the mic, Mike.
The reason for the plate height request for the variance is so that the ceilings can be 12 feet on the first floor, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And if you didn't, if it wasn't, how high would the ceilings be on the first floor if you didn't get the plate height variance, 10 feet? Is that what you're saying?
If it came out of the first floor, or only out of the first floor, it would be 10 feet, yeah.
Okay. Okay. But the pictures, the height is still, we're not going for any variances for height.
30 feet is the max no matter what. We're not
Right.
asking for that. Technically, it's a height variance because the location of the plate triggers that. But if it were not in the WF district and it was a 30-foot house, we're not having this discussion.
Right, and it's only a two-story house?
Correct.
Okay.
So again, this is a case where the maximum footprint isn't being utilized by the applicant. The maximum height is, the plate in the middle there is the issue. Had they gone 2.5 stories, it could, no problem. If the plate were lower, it's still gonna be the exact same height. In fact, actually, Mr. Feibush has it down a little bit from where it would be. You can't tell the difference other than from inside the house. The massing stays the same. And if you say, why do you want 12-foot ceilings? Mr. Feibush has a couple chandeliers that really want, you've seen that Kohler commercial where they design the house around the faucet? The house is basically designed around the chandelier. There's a certain height that's necessary for that to go in. He could have gone 2.5 stories, didn't want it. Then if you look at the height of the floor to ceiling on the second floor, it's, you know, a normal height. So you could say, Mr. Richmond, why not make the second floor higher and the first floor lower? It doesn't work based upon him wanting to design the house, especially from the water views, around what he finds to be very important, which is the chandelier. So I'm gonna have Steve walk through the design, because even though we were here before, we are taking this on as an entirely new application. So, Steve, if you don't mind, take the mic and just walk through the design of the house and particularly pay close attention to the issue at hand, which is the reason the plate height has to be where it is and the overall roof line and whether or not it would be any different if the plate height were higher or lower.
Hello again, thanks for having us back. So just to briefly go through the house, the lower level, of course, which is in the floodplain, we only have our garage and the lower entry area. The first floor comprises the main entry, then we have the main living space, which is the kitchen, living room, dining room. On the other side, we have the laundry and utility room, and then we're doing, it's gonna be some sort of flex room, a gym or a family room, most likely. And of course, the outdoor deck, which we've, greatly redesigned to be compliant. Second floor, the bedroom floor. This is where all 6 bedrooms are, and a second floor deck out the back. That's really the gist of the plan. Any questions about the first floor?
The living room, dining room is off on the left, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Right here.
Where's this massive chandelier going to be?
Couple spots, likely the living room and the dining room. Most of what you're seeing in plan isn't really affecting necessarily the variance issue, but
Well, I would stop you there. Not most of it, none of it is. The plans that you've shown have no impact on the variance at all, correct?
that's correct.
Other than if you were in the actual built house, that the floor to ceiling height would be greater or lesser depending on what the plate height is.
Correct, yeah.
If you're outside of the house, across the street, across the water, wherever you are, the ultimate envelope of the house would be bigger if the variances weren't granted, correct?
Correct, yeah, it could potentially be actually quite a bit larger, more massive.
It's very important because, again, we're talking about a by right house, no variances, bigger. The variance house with the plate height, accommodating the chandeliers, 12 feet on the first floor, 9 on the second, that house massing is smaller in your professional opinion, correct?
Absolutely, correct.
Okay.
So Eric, the plate height, will it go, so what you're saying, was the plate height gonna go front to back? Where are you trying to create your, I mean, because you've got all those A's up there, I mean, you're gonna have a lot of cut lines running around on top of the top plate, because you got the drop in the, by the deck. So all that is all, like, just slop off the entire roof, and your top plate is gonna be somewhere around, on the diagram you gave us.
Right.
So is that where this imaginary line going all the way around here is where your top plate is gonna be, right?
Yeah, so if you look at the section on the bottom left, you can see where that's cut through in plan. So that's going through one of those gable wings.
It'll be hidden in there. You won't see it.
That's right.
Okay. So the only area you're gonna see it will be the area that faces the water and the street. Am I got that right?
See, can you say that again?
This area here is facing the water and the street.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep. Well, you'll see that eave line along the sides, if that's what you're describing, right? And at the interior of the structure.
You're gonna have different roof pitches? Depending on the width of the particular wings? Yes. This is wider than that. This wider than
These are all fine.
Well, our
This is through the narrower ones?
This is 512, 512.
So what the diagram is showing is it's showing a possible by right mass, and the dashed blue line is our proposed, is basically a cut through our proposed roof. So it's comparing two different scenarios where you have by right masses.
This is not actually what you would.
No, that's not our proposed building. This is really a diagram meant to kind of get at the heart of the matter, which is describing the intent of that portion of the code.
Well, is this dimension the same as that dimension?
No, they're different, but the middle section would be also a 512 in that scenario.
Is there any 512 on the actual scenario?
The central portion of our roof
Right.
is, because it's the widest part, and as necessary, we had to.
And the
identify.
intent of the ordinance when we changed it from 28 to 30 feet was to bring the roof pitches higher. Due to technicalities and us miswording the ordinances, it has allowed 512. That was never the intent, and the purpose was to increase roof pitches, and that was the reason we put in the 20-foot sidewall.
Yeah, but don't you have like you have an 812 pitch on the right here, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and then you have an 812 pitch on the left-hand side, right?
Right, I mean,
So the middle part, which really you don't really see too much of, is the one with the
Exactly,
512 pitch.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, the portions that
And
are
when
actually.
you're building a modern house like this, a lot of times, if it was in another municipality, that could also almost be a
Yeah.
flat roof.
We would actually like to increase the pitch of that if we could, but
Right.
we can't, so.
Right.
So just to be clear, there's no portion of the house where it's less than a 512 pitch, correct?
No, of course not.
Can't be.
No.
Okay. So we're not seeking a roof pitch variance at all?
Nope.
Good.
This whole center is this one, yeah.
Anybody else?
You're having,
Sorry.
you're having zero overhangs,
That's correct, yep.
and no gutters?
We have a detail for an internal gutter.
Internal.
Yeah.
Is that, it's not indicated on
No, it's not shown on that. It's just design intent at this point, but we'll definitely, of course, those will be on the construction drawings.
But I understand where Mr. Roslewski's going here. all water will be guttered and will be retained and put off-site. Nothing's going to go onto the neighboring property, correct?
No, of course not. Yeah, we'll control all the water that comes off of the house and control it properly.
Well, FYI, on the bay, am I correct about this? The gutters have to come down into a conduit, which will lead out to the bulkhead, correct? Is that the same situation in this area?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
So there'll be no drainage onto the neighboring properties, it'll all be right out into the bay.
Right to the bay.
It'll all be compliant,
Okay.
of course.
Unless the board has any further questions for Mr. Black, we can put Mr. Barnhart on here. Certainly we can come back to him, and then Mr. Harmon as well.
I do have a question. On the main roof where you had the 5-on-12 roof pitch, what is the actual height of that? It looks like it's less than 30 feet.
On our proposed roof.
Yes.
Yeah. It's so
like 29?
only, so of all our roofs, only the right side, the northernmost part.
The two
is-
ends, looks like.
Yeah, so the one end is at 30. The other roofs are below 30. So it's only the one gable. The other gable is about 6 inches below. The middle roof is probably about 14 inches, I think, below.
So the amount of mass that's between the 28 and 30 feet is very limited. It's only about a foot along the main ridge on the main roof in the middle. And on the ends, it's, you know, a triangular piece that's pretty small, like 2 foot and...
Exactly, that's exactly it.
And kind of following up on that, the entire roof is not at the height where we're looking to go as high as we can. It's a portion, as you said, kind of bridged by a much lower portion in the middle. So you've got higher side, and then lower side along the middle.
Roger, are we actually looking at two variances that are tied together, the plate height and the 30 feet versus 28 feet?
No, in order to get the 30 feet height in a 28-foot zone, the former 28-foot zone, there's exceptions. One of them is a plate height of 20 feet to get that 20, to get the 30 feet. They're not meeting that, so therefore it's a height variance.
But if we
There's
give
no
them
top of plate variance, it's a height variance.
If we give them the variance for the plate height, then we automatically kick in the 30-foot.
The variance is actually for the height. They're not meeting the exception.
Because the condition of it is the 20-foot plate.
So they can't go higher.
So 30 feet is your maximum height. We can't go higher than that, nor are we asking to. It's the same height we'd be allowed by right, but for this plate height restriction.
The way I see it, they're tied.
They are, and this is a little bit interesting with the zoning code because it's a bit unclear. You're saying, is it a plate height variance or a house height variance? But Roger's correct. It's a house height variance based upon the condition of the plate not being met.
Agreed.
It's like reading stereo instructions. You got to go from one to the other to the other. They never kind of wind up in the same spot. Very confusing.
Without meeting the plate height requirement, you can only go to 28 feet.
Correct. If we met the plate height requirement,
to 30.
we could be at 30. This is not, it's a by right
You don't,
application.
so you're above 28, so you need the variance.
Correct.
I'm looking at this drawing that you sent out to us. You're showing a 512 up top here, and then you're showing the blue dotted line as proposed. The blue line proposed to me looks somewhere around an 8 or a 9.
Right, that's actually the outline of our proposed roof. So it
Well, that
is
would
an
be an 8 or a
812.
9. Why, you have 512 up here.
That's for the,
By right.
that's for the by right scenario. So there's basically two roof lines that are shown. The 512 is describing the actual section that's drawn. The dashed line is our proposed 812 roof slope.
On those ends.
Oh, okay.
On the ends.
That's what I'm saying. That blue line's about an 8.
Yeah,
Eight
you're
or
right,
9.
you're right. Yep.
The blue line is what we want to build,
Right.
which has less mass than if you look at the black line.
So if you reduce that blue line to 5-on-12, you probably would comply, but the problem is the middle section.
Correct.
Does the glazing account for the increase of the ceiling heights? Because you have a lot of windows in this building.
Does the glazing account for the ceiling?
Plate height, the increased ceiling heights. Because you have the real large windows with the atrium.
Yeah. Yeah, it basically follows the structure itself.
Right. So he's got to get bigger windows, and he's trying to increase his ceiling height to get more exposure for the chandelier, so you need higher ceilings.
I was taking advantage of that vista of the water.
Right.
Right, the bay side is really, aesthetically is meant to open up to the bay side and just enjoy it. That's all.
Let's talk about the base.
So wait, you wouldn't have a bay view if you lowered the ceiling? That's
No,
what,
Of course we'd have.
it's gonna be extensive windows on the bay
Correct.
side. This, I.
That's not the issue
I
at
just
all,
think you're
yeah.
pushing the limit there. You're gonna have a magnificent bay views, magnificent windows. This has nothing to do with that. You're
No,
just
it's-
making that
That's right.
bigger.
Yeah,
Right.
that's not the issue.
It's not, that's not the issue. The issue is to have as high a floor to ceiling height as possible on the first level.
To get the chandeliers.
Correct.
Can we see the chandeliers?
All right, Mr. Feibush is actually going to testify, if you don't mind, for a minute here, can maybe answer some questions.
Sure.
Or you have not been sworn in, so please.
Sure.
Mr. Feibush, just your name and address, please.
Ori Feibush, 8807 Fulton Avenue.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I do. Thank you. I'll be brief. I purchased this property in the winter of last year. I knew I could build 2 homes on this property. I knew I could build an extra 5,000 square feet at this location. None of that was important to me. One item that was central to me was that I could build less square footage, but over 2 floors to accommodate the ceiling height that I was hopeful of receiving. I emailed extensively with Margate City. I verified that I could build the 2 stories across 30 feet, and I could share that ceiling height. At the end of last year, the zoning changed for our specific property, and something that was permitted as a matter of right was no longer permitted when the underlying zoning for my property changed. I didn't know that even 2 months ago. If you go to Margate City's planning website and you click on zoning map, it's the old zoning map. So I had no way of knowing as a layperson that I could no longer build what I'd hoped to build. I know it does sound...
What was it that changed?
It's now...
It's the WF, it's not on the old zoning map is on the website still.
So it's that specific part. So across the street, I could build to 30 feet on 2 floors. It's only on our side of the street that you're not permitted. If I was on the opposite side of Fulton Avenue...
You could have a 22-foot
That's correct.
wall on the side
It's
with a
exclusively...
30-foot height?
That's correct, sir.
It's the WF zone.
No, you can't. You can't. There's no place in the city you could have a 22-foot plate height.
Yes, sir. It's
30 feet?
It's only the WF zone, so it's only our strip of properties. And when I purchased the property, and I know it sounds silly, and I'll show you some of these photos, which might embarrass me further, but I'll at least explain myself, it was something that was very, very important to me. I've spent my entire life collecting Bradley and Hubbard Victorian chandeliers. They're 1870s chandeliers. I have the largest collection in the world. I've traveled all across the United States to collect these. They're all enormous. They came out of old churches, old rail stations, hotels. But it's taken a lifetime. Some people collect cars and restore them. I go from city to city trying to collect these pieces. I already see you laughing, and my wife laughs at me just the same, so it's okay. You're in good company. It was something that was very important to me. And I didn't buy the property with a hope and a dream. I bought it with the explicit understanding that I could, in fact, build exactly what I was hoping to build. And at some point from winter of last year until today, the zoning changed, and that's no longer possible. So it's not that I came in here with the scenario of I'm sure I'm going to get a variance. It was a by right application, which changed and is no longer by right. I will say that both my neighbors immediately to the north and the south completely support the project. I've notarized letters from them affirming that support. And just to show what I'm describing here and the mass of these, I'm happy to pass these along so you have a sense here. These are all built over the course of 4 or 5 years by a manufacturer out of Connecticut, but it's a collection that is world-class. There's one other one of these in the Smithsonian. We have every other one, and I would love to be able to display these in a home that I'm not taking advantage of anything. Our eave line is lower, our roof pitch is steeper. I could build 5,000 square feet more here, all of these things. None of that's important. I want to be a good neighbor. I'm eager to build a home that I very much believe complements and enhances Margate streetscape. I'd love for my architects at some point here to show a rendering of what we're trying to build, because you'll see that we're so far below the mass and so far less imposing than what anyone else might propose to build here. If we could.
No worries, I'll stop. That's good. The personal touch is important. Back up. So, what Uri had said earlier is in fact a little bit of a quirk, which is, and Mr. Patterson had a question, on the open bay, you can do less than across the street throughout the WF zone. So the WF zone restricts what he can do, and he's right, if the house were across the street or on the beach, not this problem. But unfortunately, along Bay Shore and along Fulton, there are areas where it's almost a penalty that you're on the bay and not across the street. So this is the final house.
So Eric, that's your hardship you're showing, is the fact that there's just across the street?
Well, just across the street, you could build the house that he would like without a variance. Being on the water is a little bit of a penalty.
And I think,
But if you look at the house, Mr. Black can walk us through, Mr. Barnhart's going to take a chance. But I'll go first. This exact roof line and the height of the house is the same with or without this variance. So sometimes you look at a house and say, we're going bigger, we're going wider. This looks exactly the same, as does the back. It's just a matter of what's inside changes greatly. Is that correct, Steve? I just want to make sure I'm not speaking out of school.
Exactly, that's correct.
Now, Steve, put this together, so if you don't mind just testifying what the plate height change does to the interior of the house and the exterior. Obviously, I already said the exterior, nothing changes, but just walk us through how this affects the ultimate overall design.
Yeah, so the plate height is essentially a part of, it's how the structure would be constructed, in that it's bringing that plate height down. And like Eric said, you would still have the exact same building mass. However, the ceiling heights just wouldn't be as generous. So, whether it's 2 stories or 3 stories, in this case, obviously, we'd much rather a better quality 2-story, and that's really all there is to it.
In your professional opinion, could there possibly be any detriment to the plate height being higher, because no one on the outside of the house will see anything different from what's shown there, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So no detriment would exist, correct?
No.
And to the extent that there could possibly be a detriment, would the overall benefits greatly outweigh that detriment? Because nobody, unless you're in the house, would notice that the plate height changed, because the overall massing of the house would be exactly the same.
Right, yep.
And that's really important. We keep saying, I keep saying over and over again, nothing changes. If you're looking at the house and it looks exactly the same or smaller, the variance is a better planning alternative, because it takes into account light, air, and open space staying under the maximum height, which would otherwise keep the views good from whoever would be able to tell 30 feet to 29 feet from across the street or anywhere else. This house is small, and that's what we have to keep saying over and over again, but it's correct.
That is correct.
All right. Unless anybody has a question for Mr. Black, I'm going to have Mr. Barnhart testify from a professional planning standpoint as to what we've said already ad nauseum. Mr. Barnhart, you've been sworn in, and the board's accepted your credentials as a professional planner and licensed professional engineer. Would you walk us through what we've been talking about for the past half an hour or so, and explain in your professional opinion if the massing of this house is better than the massing of what could be built by right?
Sure. So when Mr. Feibush came back to us with regard to the application before you this evening, and he recognized from the prior application, the requests were, I hate to use the word inappropriate, but this board felt that the requests based on the size of this lot were not necessary to design a beautiful home. He went back to the drawing board with his team. He eliminated all of those prior requests, but for what we've been talking about for the last half hour, and that is 24 inches on the plate height of the wall structure. So this is this, in my opinion, from a planning perspective, is a classic case of a C2 variance, where we believe that the design that the architectural team has put forward is more beneficial to the neighbors, to the neighborhood, and to the community than the by right condition would otherwise be, because of the uniqueness of the design and some of the things that they have put into this development. So why can I make that statement? Well, we have a large lot here. The lot area is 7,484 square feet. If you max out the building coverage, which, as we all know, in nearly every case that we work on, the building coverage gets maxed out. If you max out the building coverage on this lot at 50%, and I was doing some calculations, and you go 2.5 stories, you're looking at, Mr. Feibusch overshot it a little bit, you're looking at almost 4,000 square feet of additional living space that could be permitted by right on this site. That's a whole nother house from an area perspective. So that's a real, what I see from a planning perspective, as a real give back, because he has the ability to build a house that is so out of character with the surrounding houses with regard to its square footage and its mass and its area, but he's chosen not to do that because he recognizes it's not appropriate here, and he's trying to create a real grand appearance for that main living floor at 12 feet, and a real grand appearance for a home that is, that is very, very unique for this location. The second topic with regard to why this design is a benefit. If you look at the landscape coverage, he is 14% greater in front yard landscape coverage than what is required. Again, most times I'm here trying to justify a landscape coverage variance or a front yard landscape coverage variance. He's in excess by 14.2% in his front yard landscape area. Again, that is a true benefit to the neighborhood and a true benefit to the community, but because of that excess. The deviation here is a 2-foot height variance with regard to the height of a wall. Not the overall peak height of the building, that is permitted by ordinance. As you heard, across the street, this building would be permitted by ordinance with this height at this plate height. And if the roof lines were redesigned to meet the minimum roof pitches, because this is also important to remember, as I understand the way your ordinance is written, if the roof lines were redesigned to meet the minimum roof pitches that are required by ordinance, the plate height that is proposed on this lot would be conforming if these roofs maxed out at 28 feet. As you heard the architect mention, these roofs are 29 feet, sound like about 28.5 feet, and then one of the roofs actually approaches 30 feet. So the request sounds, I guess you could say the request sounds like a big one. It's 2.2 feet over the required plate height. But when you look at this project as a whole, and you look at both the front and the rear elevations, these renderings, and you look at the relief that this design is creating on the front with the ins and outs of the front of the building, and you look at the massive relief on that second floor as you're looking at this building from the bay front, and you look at the fact that there is not 1 square foot of living space on a third floor anywhere in this building, and you look at the thought that this architectural team has put into this design, all in effort to try to preserve his request of a 12-foot ceiling height because it's that important to the design and his intended use of the building. We believe this is a balancing scenario where the benefits of all of those things that he has given up on with this size and mass of this house dramatically outweigh the potential negative impact of allowing that additional plate height.
And John, I just want to kind of hammer that home a little bit.
Yep.
All of the other things you're referencing are 100% by right. So Mr. Feibusch, by saying, I'm going to give all of that up, but I want my chandeliers and I want the ceiling height to be higher, is the justification balancing test of, I'm not going to get all of that other stuff because I want one thing in a much, much smaller house. I just want my ceiling height to be higher on the first floor.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to mislead. It's a big house, but it's a very large bayfront lot. And the ability to create a much more massive house from a bulk standpoint, from a building square footage standpoint, from a living space standpoint, the ability to do that is here, but he has chosen not to go in that direction because those ceiling heights are so important to him. And I think that what he has given back that would be permitted by ordinance that benefit far outweighs the negative impact that this plate height impact would have.
All right, so let's talk about views of the house. If you're looking at the street, the overall height, looking at the street, from the street towards the house, the overall height of the house is smaller than it could be by right, correct? As
The overall
designed,
height of the house is, the peak height, you mean?
we're talking about massing. The house itself, if built by right, and the plate height were lower, could be 30 feet, no variances, correct?
If the plate height, yes, that's correct, yes.
And if you're looking at the house design as proposed, could you tell the difference between this and the house if it were designed by right?
No, my opinion from a planning perspective and from an engineering perspective, with what we're talking about, it's 2 feet, but if you stand on the ground away from this building, I would defy anybody to tell me that to be able to eye up and see that 2 foot differential in the plate height that we're talking about. I mean, it's
internal to the house, correct?
It's not just internal to the house. It creates a higher exterior wall in that location. But when you look at the actual footprint or the actual envelope of the house and everything that's going on, it's essentially not discernible.
And no one can tell what's going on inside the house with regard to the floor to ceiling height, other than you look at the windows and you can see people standing higher if you're at that window, correct?
Correct.
Right. That affects you from inside the house, not outside.
But the outside of the house is 2 foot higher than if it met the requirements. I don't, Eric says there is no physical difference. I
No,
just
that's
don't
why,
For the overall height,
that's
there's
why I
not.
corrected that.
That's what
a
I
little
don't
bit, Rich.
understand,
Yeah,
right.
that's
The
why I
overall
corrected
height
it.
isn't, but the
That-
wall is.
What I'm pointing to right there, Rich.
You're saying it's
higher.
insignificant, but there is a 2 foot difference.
Yes, there is a difference, absolutely. Absolutely,
Not in the total height, just at the,
correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
The total height
Right
is the
there.
same.
If you take that, you know, because there's no eaves here, so essentially that is, the way this is designed, that is kind of like your plate height.
And is that the roof that's the 812 pitch?
Yes.
Yes, that's the 812 pitch roof.
So, right, so you still have, even though the plate height's 2 feet higher, you still have an 812 pitch there, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Just from a technical standpoint, I do want to have Mr. Harmon very briefly just acknowledge what was said earlier, because he is the licensed New Jersey architect and Mr. Black is not. If you don't mind, just for a second here. All right. You've been sworn in, you've obviously heard the testimony. You've been accepted as the board, as an expert the prior time we were here. You testified before boards in the state. Just want you to acknowledge, if you will, what you've heard. As a licensed professional architect in the state of New Jersey, do you see any detriments associated with the design of the house as presented?
No, I do not. No.
And to the extent that there were any possible detriments, would the benefits far outweigh them based upon New Jersey's land use code as well as Margate's municipal land use code?
I guess in my opinion, I would say yes.
The benefits would far outweigh that.
Correct.
Mr. Harmon is sworn in, he is licensed in the state. Anyone has questions for him, just answer them.
Okay.
Unless the board, I'm sorry.
I have
Roger
a
has
couple comments here that Mr. Fibush made. You said that this is a by right 30-foot height a year ago. I just want to say that's inaccurate. There was a height zone map. This is a 28-foot zone always. The only thing that changed was the designation of the zone. It used to be S40. We made it S40WF because you have a higher building coverage. That's the difference. It was always 28 feet. We added the exception to allow 30 feet a year ago. So you'd be here no matter what for a height variance.
But when we changed it to 30 feet, we put that 20-foot limit in, so the intent was to raise the pitch of the roof and have less mass, so.
Correct. And our position is the less mass comes in because the house is so much smaller than could be built for lot coverage on site.
Well, would he like to have a 5,000-foot square house? Would he do that? I don't understand coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Christian, the other thing that nobody really did touch on is, I believe, you know, he would have had the ability to add, even though, if you dropped the plate height and complied and went with the 30 foot, he could have thrown dormers along that edge that would have complied, been by right, and created a more massive building than what he is proposing here.
And would that fit his chandeliers?
I can answer that question, I don't know.
Suggest, if anyone else owned this lot, they would build a three-story property. So when we compare what I'm proposing to build to what would be by right, it's a reasonable statement because no one other than me would take two lots, turn them into one larger lot, and build a much smaller property. So it's a fair analysis to suggest that the three-story home would in fact be more imposing than our property. So I think it's important to just to share that anyone else owning this would in fact have a three-story structure here, and I wouldn't build it. And I respect the board's decision. I understand certainly that I'm here seeking a variance, but it's not a property that I would build because it doesn't conform to what we're hoping to accomplish.
Before we vote or anything, here's my problem. People come before the board and they can't say, well, if I do this, it's going to be too expensive. I can't afford this, or other reasons. They're not something we should consider. You have a beautiful collection, but that's really not something that we should be considering because you want to hang your collection in the house, that we change the rules, and we change the rules for a reason. I don't see any basis for the variance because of beautiful, absolutely beautiful fixtures that you have.
Well, it's not-
I can't.
I understand your position, Mr. Patterson, but we're not talking about the variance because of the fixtures. It's just a factor to consider. We're talking about, as John said, the variance because the plan as presented is a better design alternative.
But it's so easy to fix this with an 8-foot ceiling and an 11-foot ceiling, which won't fit his fixtures. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I don't see any reason here that the board can consider. I understand what he wants.
No, but I think the board can
just don't
consider the
see-
planning alternative. When we talk about the C2 variance, and John said it's really a classic C2 case. Legally, you talk about, does the design of the house as applied for create a better alternative than what could be built by right? So if you look at the massing by right, it's much, much bigger than what we've applied for. So take the chandeliers out for a second. I kind of believe that's irrelevant. His reasons for wanting the house to be the way he wants it, everyone's house is personal to them. Get rid of the chandelier issue. This house is smaller than what can be built by right. As John said, we're about 4,000 square feet smaller. If you're talking about a reason to grant the variance, it's because this design alternative is better than what could be built if he just said, as Rory said, a cookie cutter, giant 3.5-story house on the bay. I'm sure there are a lot of people, 2.5-story. I'm sure there are a lot of people with this lot would say to their architects, give me the biggest possible house on the bay. I want whatever I can have to the max. And he's way under uncovered.
This has nothing to do with Mr. Flybush, but you and John come in here on houses and say, we want this house on the bay, we want this cookie cutter house, but you don't call them cookie cutter houses, but if it fits, a cookie cutter house fits there, that's okay.
Right, but would the board, and I think the answer to this is going to be no, prefer to have what could be built by right? A 2.5-story, 11,000 square foot house versus.
We come up with this all the time, and there is, and we do agree. Look, I understand your point, and we allow some and we don't allow
Right.
some.
And I think a lot of it has to do with, and they're talking about something being precedential that really isn't. We're talking about this house taken in a vacuum. Is this house, here's the question you have to answer, is this house better than what otherwise could be built there by right?
See, so I agree with Mr. Patterson. You can't, I don't want to, because we're here every month, okay? So I really don't want to hear about what we could do,
Do it.
So I agree with him on that.
But that
Now,
is-
let me finish, okay? So, as far as the city of Margate goes, and what's good, I think 99% of the residents of Margate have no idea what the hell we're talking about with plate heights. I mean, you have an 8-12 pitch. We just voted in a case a couple cases ago where they didn't meet the third floor thing. They didn't meet it, but we thought that I thought anyway, that the design was better for the neighborhood. I really, and I think that there is validity. I'm like, why does he want 12-foot ceilings? You know, now I see the reasoning. You know, it's a special situation. That's why we ask for variances, because of special situations. But, Eric, I gotta agree. This thing all the time about, oh, we could do this, we could do that. I think that reasoning is a little off.
And it might be, but the problem
Well,
with
it
that
is.
is, but when you talk about reasons for variances, there's two. Hardship and C2, which is the better planning alternative.
Right.
Most of the time, and we know this, we're not really looking at hardships. A hardship to build a house this big doesn't exist.
Right.
Okay? Your typical hardship case is your lot's too narrow, and there are plenty of those. You know, we have 25-foot wide lots in town. But the hardship cases really aren't your typical Margate variance. For the most part, what happens is applicants buy a piece of property, they go to their architect, the architect says, this is what I can design, the person falls in love with the design and says, get me that house. And then we come in week after month and say, well, this is better, that's better, and you hear all the different arguments, and one month, John and I are arguing that this is a better alternative, and the next month we're saying it's worse. And I understand that the board may not want to hear what could be built there, but that is the legal standard now. We're talking about a house that's not a hardship, because not being able to have chandeliers and not being able to have 12-foot ceiling is not a legal hardship, but it is a better planning alternative, because the board's well aware, most people that have their lots, especially on the water, will do whatever they can do to max out everything. I mean, there are people,
But if that's allowed, why is it a worse alternative? I mean, we accept
well, because
that.
it's bigger and it blocks up views and light and air and open space. It
Any more
creates-
than this house would?
Oh, sure.
You,
This could be 2 lots?
This could be 2 lots,
By
yeah.
right subdivision?
It is, right.
So we could have 2 houses,
You could have 2 houses, total of 10 bedrooms.
taking up more air, light, and space.
Correct.
and you could also cut the height 2 feet without hurting
you
anybody.
could
When
do
I
just
brought
about
up the
anything.
thing about money, we can't consider the fact that I can't afford this. The reasons for this is so easy to be fixed that
But
there's,
under that scenario,
wait, you go back to that other case where you're jammed between giant
Right.
ugly buildings around you. Some things can't be fixed, but this can be fixed so easily.
but respectfully, isn't every case fixed easily? Every case that comes in, you say landscape
No, the
coverage-
last case that he brought up was not fixed easily because it was surrounded
Okay.
by giant
But
ugly
as a
buildings.
general
So,
rule-
no, every case can't be fixed
As a
easily.
general rule, you could say, could you put in more landscape coverage? Could you make your master bedroom smaller? Could you make your, of course you could.
I don't think it's comparable. I just don't.
Okay, look,
Right.
respectfully, you know,
Right.
we're all doing this for a living, so we understand that from any given application, we're gonna have a different opinion from case to case. In this one, I think based on the totality of the circumstances, and I don't wanna rely too heavily on what's gone on in the past, but remember, the deck height in the backyard was much higher. Now it conforms. The board had a problem with the placement of the pool. Now it conforms.
The board had a problem with the height.
Right, but everything else conforms. We've gone back and made changes so substantial that coverage conforms. That issue with the pool hanging over, it all now conforms, but one thing. And I do,
One thing that we changed a year ago to prevent this, I mean, we didn't make this law to hurt him. We made this law because we thought it needed to be made, and
well,
that,
I would agree with Mr. Richmond in that regard, that I don't think the change in the plate height
Eric,
would have,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
Sure. Go
just for a point of clarification, we are getting hung up on this 20-foot imaginary line. The problem we have here is that we put that 20-foot line in, why? Because we had some maybe bad architects that came in with some bad plans.
we put it in with the intent of
I
a
know.
steeper
Hold on,
roof, which
let me
we don't
finish.
have here.
Let me finish. And we had problems, and the architectural plans showed walls that didn't belong, you remember, Clem, the pitches that were out. We came up and said, we need to fix this, and everything that we do is because somebody messed it up in the first place, okay? So-
came up when we raised the height to 30 feet.
Right, but that's because we were getting plans in that were big. And we changed it, we put the line in, and now we're just fixating on an imaginary 20-foot line. But the line, the 20-foot was there primarily because everybody is putting third floors on. So now the third floor is going away, We're arguing over 2 feet of an imaginary line that wasn't the intent.
It was,
No, it
you're
wasn't.
absolutely wrong on
I
this,
voted
Tom.
on this.
Well, you weren't listening then. The 20-foot line was put in when the decision was, are we going from 28 to 30 feet? And it was that we will only go to 30 feet if we find some method to get a steeper roof.
Right.
The method we came up with did not work, and we're changing that. But that 20-foot line, imaginary, was so the roofs would be steeper.
But in this case here, you're still getting the 5 and 12 and 8 and 12 roofs, which are greater than we would have gotten without. So the
With a 28-foot house instead of a 30-foot house.
But it-
Whatever, go ahead, Eric. We
No,
could go
I
on.
think, look, the back and forth is good, and we can talk about, what is worthwhile and what's not. I think the professionals and Mr. Feibush have presented a case that satisfies the C2 requirement. Obviously, this is an issue that the board feels very strongly about, which is great. I mean, that the reason you're here is because people come before you to seek variances. If everything were built by right, we wouldn't be here. So I think we're prepared to rest unless the board has any further questions, but based upon all the professional testimony, we're gonna potentially have to agree to disagree as to the importance of the plate height, whether or not the reasons for the adoption of that ordinance were specifically to address this, or as Mr. Collins said, to address potential sloppy architecture where something didn't look correct. But we think we've,
Eric, the reason I raised it was so we would have this discussion before the vote. So you had a chance, and Mr. Feibush had a chance to respond and give your reasonings and whatever. I didn't want to spring that without hearing your side of it. So that was the purpose of bringing it up.
I think it's very important to know what goes into the board's decision, of course. But having said all of that, when you look at the house, I would respectfully ask the board to consider whether or not that mass is different in your eyes, and you can tell, than if the plate height were lower. And I would say you can't.
Are the ceilings on the second floor cathedral? Are the ceilings on the second floor cathedral?
He said they're 9 feet.
Well, yeah, but they could be,
They could be.
well, they could, that's what I'm saying. Do you know what I'm saying?
So, yeah, a portion of the ceilings would definitely be cathedral. And anything
Well, I
on
mean,
the
if-
gable
if-
ends would be.
Let's just say, if you lowered the ceiling height on the second floor to 8 foot, but you had cathedral ceilings, then you'd still get, you know what I mean? You would still get that higher height.
Understood.
And, it's just a suggestion, because then, instead of going 2 feet above the plate height, you'd only be 1 foot above the plate height. That's just
Understood,
thought.
right, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Michael,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be okay if they just dropped it to 2 feet and panned the second floor ceilings to 9 feet? It would only come in on the width of that thing. You're only talking about a pan that would be like 3 feet on the border.
Right, yeah.
You follow where I'm going with that?
I'm just
No,
thinking
not-
of,
not
I'm just trying to
exactly, no.
think of an
If you
alternative.
drop that plate height on the outside, you wouldn't notice the difference. Put your roof back on, give it a higher pitch up top, but you would pan inside. So you'd still have your 9-foot ceilings at the second floor. Because you don't have a third floor, so there's no attic space, there's nothing up there. So if you pan them or trade them, some people call them tray.
That's essentially what Mike said.
Right.
Yeah, that's, just trying to, what's that?
He's vaulted, you're flat.
Yeah.
You know, 2 years ago, there was no top plate, 20 feet. They'd still be here for a 2-foot height variance. We wouldn't be spending an hour and a half on plate height. It would be a straight height variance, a lot less dialogue. I still think that the proofs have been put on for a 2-foot height variance. From a technical perspective, I understand where the board's coming from. We're trying to keep the mass down. That's a unique looking building, and it's better than that hollow box that used to be on the beach. I mean, that one that was torn down, the
All
echo
right.
chamber.
Yes.
Well, I'm just,
Oh, wait, Mr. Roslewski was,
I'm saying, I think you ought to put the top plate away.
Right.
This is a 2-foot height variance. on the bay. If they were across the street, they'd be able to do it. Last year, the year before, 10 years ago.
Without a height variance?
Gentleman, Mr.
No, no,
Westlake, you had a
It
question.
was
I
across the
think
street
you-
without a height variance, yes.
The 12-foot is somehow related to your chandelier. Is that an absolute height? Must you have 12 feet to accommodate your collection? Could you do it in 11?
So my home in Philadelphia was designed at 12 feet, and the builder accidentally built the foundation out of the ground, and it's at 10 foot 11 inches, and we haven't been able to hang any of them. So it seems silly, but yes, I don't have a single one that's less than 5.5 feet in length. And we're a short family, so I'm sure when you first looked at the request, it looked like all my friends were NBA players. Why else would he want 12 feet? There's just no additional space that could be given on that first floor. You know, on the second floor here, I'm certainly willing to concede 6 inches if that helps in any way. I genuinely want to show good faith. I want to get this home built. I want to be a good neighbor and build what I believe to be a really well-designed, well-thought-out development here. You know, and I only suggest 6 inches because there's only a tiny portion of our roof that's 30 feet. The mean is quite a bit less than that. So that gets the majority of it below 28. And I don't know if that's material to any of you, but I'd certainly be willing to stipulate a reduction in 6 inches. It's meaningful to me inside, but it's more meaningful to not be able to develop a house, which I'd very much be hopeful of developing.
How about if you went to 11 feet, but knowing where the chandeliers are going to be, you could pan the ceiling up, beam around 6, 7, 8 foot opening, use some kind of a structural deck above instead of just plain plywood.
So,
You'd get your 12-foot back for your chandeliers.
I think it's a lot, I mean, if you're gonna, so you're saying, on the second floor, if you knocked, you know, something off that and you cathedraled the ceilings and you're gonna still get that, you know what I mean?
yes, I'm in agreement. I
Yeah,
said
you're
I'd be
gonna
willing.
get that, I don't know if you were just planning on going to 9 feet and running a flat ceiling? Were you planning on that?
So
Because
in the master's.
I'm saying like, if any ceiling that you can on the second floor, if structurally you can, you know, vault the ceilings.
Sure, and
Then you would actually get more height than if you just had a 9-foot ceiling with a flat roof. You know, it's a much more open thing, which we do, you know, I'm a builder, we did that a lot
May
when
we-
you only have a 2-story house.
May we take just a minute to internally talk?
Take 5 minutes.
Okay.
5-minute break. All right, we're back in session. Mr. Goldstein?
Yeah, thank you very much. So having had an opportunity to engage in a very substantial discourse with the board, the architect's owner and engineer and I had a chance to talk outside for a little bit because we want to take the board's experience into consideration in the design of the house. Seems like what could work, and again, thank all of you for your input, would be to drop the plate height 1 foot and then to increase the roof pitches in the areas where the plate height comes down and the roof pitches go up. The applicant would amend his application so that the plate height would be still a variance, technically a height variance, but not 2.2 feet, but rather 1.2 feet. And then the roof pitches would increase accordingly, down from what they are now to a number which we haven't calculated yet, but obviously the lower we drop the plate height, the greater the roof pitches increase, which, as Mr. Patterson said, is the intent of the ordinance. So with that amendment, unless the board has questions, we would rest.
Anyone here from the public? Needs to comment, questions? Public portion, I'm sorry, go ahead. Didn't mean to shut you down.
State your name and address.
Eric Shore, 107 North Sumner. I love.
You swear to tell the truth?
I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you.
I love this building, and I would love to see this rather than 2 ugly cookie-cutter houses along the water, and I hope you support this.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public? Public portion's closed. Any
Yeah,
other
there's one other
comments?
thing I want to point out, which I don't know if it's relevant or not, but the last time this case came up, there was a posse of veteran supporters, and nobody's here now, you know.
They didn't speak, Mike.
But I think that
No,
goes
the only
to-
people that spoke were in favor of it. Oh, one was in favor of Roger only, I'm sorry.
One was only in favor of Roger. But I think that
Yeah,
goes
but they
to,
spoke to me.
this is very important, though. I think that goes to the work that Mr. Feibush put in, you know. He came in with a plan, neighbors didn't know what to do, they came to the meeting, he went back to them with a new plan. This really is the result of the best of municipal planning. You've got a design, you've got your zoning officer who modifies it, you come to the board, it gets denied, we come back. I don't know if you can look at a better case where over the course of several months, the applicant is patient enough to make all these changes, and then again, make another change during the meeting to meet the board's request. So, you know, you're right, Mr. Richard, there were people here, some of which were supporting Mr. McLaurin, some of which were just listening. They're not here tonight. That doesn't necessarily mean they support, but, you know, everyone got the letter. If they didn't like it, I suspect they'd be out. And with that, again, we would rest.
Eric, the plate height's gonna come down a foot, which will increase the pitch. Still at a maximum 30 feet is the.
Nothing will be higher than
28
30 feet.
permitted, you're requested there.
The roof peak height as submitted would stay. Plate height drops, which allows you to create more pitch.
Gotcha.
And thank you for your input. We've got a lot of experienced
Right.
people here, certainly more so than me. And to hear that was very helpful when we went out to talk about the amendment. So to all of you, it's a great pleasure to have you tell us how you think we should have done this.
And I marked a couple exhibits you showed. You passed around a hand-up that was called the comparisons concept. I marked that A1. The series of chandelier photos I called A2. And the colored rendering up on the board I called A3. I think everything else was in our submission packet.
Thank you.
So if there's no other questions, I can frame the motion or discussion. Ready? Okay. So someone needs to make a motion for a C variance for building height, where 28 feet is the permitted building height because they do not meet the plate height requirement. And they are proposing a building height of 30 feet. And the conditions will be that the applicant will drop the plate height 1 foot down to 21.2 feet, I believe, such as to increase the roof pitches. And then the other conditions will be anything else in Mr. McLaren's report, except as otherwise addressed tonight, and any applicant will comply with any representations it made during the course of the hearing.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Tom Collins,
It's a shame, in my opinion, that you had to go through so much trouble. I think what you've designed here is a magnificent home. It's not a house, it's a home. I think you should be proud of the team that you put together. They really did a nice job. Whether people like it or not, for you to take your valuable time and preserve history means a lot to a lot of us up here. I think what you're doing is phenomenal. I think the project for the neighborhood is phenomenal. There is nothing detrimental about this. We talk about imaginary lines, but let's face it, you're increasing the beauty and aesthetics of the neighborhood. You're increasing the air, the open space, the landscaping. I mean, this thing is going to be a masterpiece, and I just give you a lot of credit for it. You didn't have to change the plate height for me. I would have voted this way, either way, because I appreciate what you're doing, and I vote in favor.
Clem Wasleski,
I'm betwixt and between on this one. I'd like to see this house built so far superior architecturally to almost anything we've seen. Certainly puts Atlantic Avenue to shame than most anything would. I think there are architectural solutions that apparently the applicants do not want to take advantage of. I've been practicing for 60 years, and I think the problems here could be worked around to get down to where the heights need to be to meet our ordinance. But now we're only looking at a 1-foot variation. And, again, I say I think it can be solved otherwise, but I can't bring myself to vote against it, so I'll vote yes.
Rich Patterson,
Just like in the first case tonight, I can't say anything different than what Clem said. Exactly the same feelings, and I vote yes.
Michael Cristaldi,
I feel your pain for the disease with the lamps. I'm gonna cut it short and vote yes. I think it's a great job.
Jim Galantina,
It was good to see Mr. Harmon again, and Mr. Feibush, I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to take any more of your calls. I mean, it was a pleasure dealing with you. I vote yes.
Craig Palmisano,
The changes that were made are very good to the property and to the design of the house. It's a very nice benefit to the Margate community. I vote in favor of it also.
Michael Richmond,
I look forward to paddleboarding by and looking at the chandeliers, so.
He said you could use the stocks to paddleboard?
I'm gonna vote yes.
application passes 7-0.
Thank you all. Palmer, do I have to sign a few?
We have some new business.
Really?
Just gotta put just like you said.
I gotta get you tomorrow then.
Just gonna get yelled at. Give him that foot.
Great, awesome, thank you very much.
Last time, no greater
Normal floor situation, you got really 16 inches of water in there.
Wait till tomorrow.
You put the 3/4,
Yeah.
5/8 water. This is a foot there.
Tension, tension.
What I've done, just, I'll put a heavy piece here,
Go ahead, Roger.
and over here.
We just want to have that second meeting in January. One reason is we don't want to tie up, there's a lot of applications coming in for the end of the meeting in January. And reorg takes about maybe 15, 20 minutes. But also, we want to fix this MF zone. This MF zone has been a problem, in my opinion, for a while. You should not have to, well, if I'm building a single-family zone, I got to go down here.
And we've discussed this issue, too.
Right, we've discussed it.
This isn't something new, but this way we can fix it right away.
In the MF zone, you should be allowed to build what the MF zone allows you to build, with a higher building coverage. There's a higher density in the MF zone, we should be allowed to, if you're not exceeding the density or meeting the density, you want to build a single-family home, you still get the higher building coverage. You still have to comply with the landscape coverage. The only major difference is, there's 3 of them. One is the side yard setbacks, and MF, it's either 8 or 10 feet anyway. So you might see some variances on that. If you have a narrow lot, you can't meet that 8 or 10-foot side yard setback. And the other issue is going to be building coverage. If you have a really small lot, you're allowed 40% anyway versus the 45, or if you have the one lot tonight was over 5,000 square feet, so it was 30%. Not tonight, but. And the other issue is going to be, in the MF zone, if you have parking below, and this is before all these other FEMA regulations came into place, if you have parking below, you only allowed to have 2 stories. My suggestion would be, to allow that garage like you do anywhere else, 2.5 stories, but if you have a narrow lot at like 40 feet or less than 40 feet, just 2 stories above a garage.
Or
Because-
2.5 with no garage.
Because if you have a narrow lot, there's no way
Oh,
you're gonna
you
meet
can't-
parking.
Oh, right.
There's no way you'll meet parking requirements. So I doctored up the zoning chart, Schedule B1, with my suggestions, and that'll be presented to you in January. It's actually gonna go to the governing body next week. They're gonna refer to the planning board in January, then back to the governing body at their second meeting. So by our last meeting, it'll be in place.
Can you
And that won't take a lot of
email that
time.
to us before the meeting, so we can review it before we show up?
Yes, yes, I thought
You did.
I did.
Or you did already?
I'll resend it anyway, but, I mean,
Yeah, that'd be good.
actually, I might have just sent it to Rich just to get some feelers out there, but I will send it out to everybody tomorrow or Monday.
Roger, 40-foot lots don't count, under 40, 39 foot and down, right? For the-
Less than
Yeah,
40.
Less than 40.
Under 40, right.
I just think that's the fair way to handle that, because this parking below is working.
And one curb cut?
Yes.
It'll have to be one 18-foot instead of a 9 and a 9 spread out. We'll combine it together.
I thought you said 20 foot before. Was it 20? I thought you said
Craig.
20 foot? Oh, I'm sorry.
Gotta get a microphone.
Turn your mic on.
I thought it was 18.
I thought it was 20 foot.
We're gonna make it 18.
Blueprints, a lot of 20 foots. Tonight, it was a 20 foot.
Right. We're gonna make it 18. We're gonna
We're
shrink it
gonna
down.
make it 18?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Just for that, anything below 40.
No, 18 feet will be everywhere.
Everywhere.
Right.
Well, we still have all those other things, but that's not for this meeting, right?
No. This has to get done
Strictly,
now.
you're right.
There's
This
a
is
lot
something
of-
that needs to be done right now.
There's a lot of projects in the queue that are kind of,
And which would eliminate those projects from variances, correct? Yeah. So, and everybody read that tree ordinance that we have? And any comments or anything? Not right now, but just, everybody has it, so please review it.
we have, I'm gonna help make a form. We have a form drafted and everything.
Leo?
So I'm starting to circulate the certification sheet just to save some time, but this shouldn't take too long. I got a couple of these extra books. If anyone wants to sort of follow along, I don't know. But the JIF, the Joint Insurance Fund, is requiring the planning board attorneys to run through this land use liability book. It basically says, in response to a growing number of land use board members, or claims being brought against municipalities and land use boards, liability claims based on conduct of board members,
Anti-Semitics?
they wanna go through this. They want us to run through this book. And so, this has nothing to do with the board getting sued. We grant an approval and someone sues us to get it overturned. That's gonna happen. Those are normal. This has to do with board members doing things that subject themselves, the city, and the city to liability, like money damages. You know,
This is if you don't recuse yourself and you should recuse yourself, those type of issues.
potentially. So I'll just run through it real quick. So they basically, it's just some pointers, and it is interesting and it is helpful, but the first thing says, like, generally speaking, if you get sued personally as a board member, generally speaking, you have immunity. The law provides a lot of immunities for those things where you're not gonna be on the hook. But there are exceptions.
Immunity from being sued or immunity that we get legal coverage from the city?
Protected by the city.
You're protected by the city. And sometimes the city would come in, file a motion, and try and get you out of the case altogether.
Right, but we're not immune from being sued.
You're not
We're just
immune.
immune from being stuck on our
Personal
own.
liability.
Right,
That's it, all right.
okay. Right. It's not hard to find.
So the first section talks, it says board member immunity. It's common for a town to be held liable even when board members are personally immune. For example, in one case, an experienced developer received a Superior Court order instructing the town to approve a project after considerable delay. The planning board basically willfully ignored the court ruling and rejected the application anyway. And basically, the jury found three members, this is at the trial level, personally liable. They awarded damages, but the appellate court, I think so, maybe I'm wrong about this one. Yeah, the appellate court ruled that these board members were still protected, even in this rare instance, because the members firmly believed that they were making the right decision. So you do have broad immunity, but the general rule is certain things can affect that. In case 2, it talks about conflicts of interest. This is probably the most confusing section. There's new cases coming out all the time. I know included in our packet was this New Jersey planner that discussed 3 new situations. There is a safe harbor provision, so if you're not sure whether you have a conflict about something, and then you consult with an attorney, meaning me or somebody associated with the city, not like your friend's an attorney, and you're protected. If you speak to me and I say, no, it's not a conflict, and you serve, and then you get sued, you have a defense. Say, well, I got bad counsel. That doesn't mean the decision that the board made won't get overturned. It just means that you're not going to be subject to liability. So if you have any questions, the lesson there is if you have any questions about anything, give me a call, because a lot of these things are fact-sensitive, case-by-case basis. Sometimes, I'm not going to know everyone's situation. I know Tom had the case today. He said I happen to know that, but I usually wouldn't. Tom said, he was on the 200-foot list, so he recused himself. So sometimes it's common sense. A lot of it is. And it's up to you guys to bring certain issues to my attention if you have any question. Case 3 talks about inverse condemnation. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but basically you got to be careful that in certain situations, if you make a decision that basically makes a property if you zone it into inutility, essentially, then that could potentially put the city on the hook to purchase the property in an inverse condemnation action. It's a lot more complicated than that. Case 4 is religious cases. There's a law, Religious Land Use Institutionalized Persons Act. It's called RULIPA. Basically, if there was a case here that had to do with Muslim congregation wanted to build a mosque, and like 2 weeks later, the town adopted ordinances prohibiting it or making it a lot more difficult, and went to court, and the federal court under this religious RLIPA Act, and the federal court was swayed by how quickly council moved to change the zone, and they awarded, as a result, the town had to pay $2.5 million to purchase another property for the mosque and pay the mosque's legal bills of $5 million. So that's not going to come up too often here. And look, a lot of these things, the other thing is, if we get a situation like that, we'll have some discussions in advance. I mean, it would be a rare instance. Case 5, adult bookstores and movie theaters, I think is even less likely to come up in Margate. They have some First Amendment protections. So when one of them files an application, we'll discuss. There's one in the selective enforcement, case 6. Really, if there's any particular group of people or any person in particular, if we have some regulation that we routinely do not enforce, and it's a general consensus, we don't enforce it, and then all of a sudden we decide to enforce it against the person for any reason, because they're associated with a certain group, or then it's selective enforcement. Well, geez, this has been on the books for 20 years, now all of a sudden you're singling me out. And then the rest of it's just other helpful. about, yeah, the conduct of the meeting, under New Jersey law, boards can limit comment, and we know this, limit comment to issues that are relevant to what the board may consider in reaching its decision. The board can also insist on decorum. However, boards may not appear to be singling out an individual, follow the advice of your attorney. So if people go off on a tangent about irrelevant stuff, we can limit them. But that's rare. Most of the people focus on the issues, and when they get off the issues, we tell them.
This was the one, I don't understand this. You have to be with us when we visit properties?
The next part deals with site visits.
And this was brought up in the Abbott case.
Yeah, I mean, it says, the courts have emphasized that the knowledge gained from site visits, well, first of all, they recognize that board members need to visit proposed development sites, but caution board members not to go beyond the arguments and allegations advanced during the board's meetings. So courts have emphasized that knowledge gained from a visit should be placed on the record. So if you go to a site and there's something that you pick up about the site, bring that out in the course of the presentation by the applicant. The earlier, the better.
And state that you were there and this is a problem.
I went to the site, I noticed this, so they have an opportunity to respond. What would be bad is if you don't say anything, the thing closes, it goes to a motion, and it's your turn to vote, and you say, I went to the property and I noticed this, therefore I'm voting no. And it's like, where did that come from? And then the applicant can say, well, I didn't know that. Now, the next thing says, for this reason, it's good practice to have the board attorney at site meetings and to announce the date and time of the visits. My reading of this is if the board as a group in the middle of an application that was going over, I mean, I've had cases for Walmart that they've extended over, like in other towns, have extended over 10 hearing nights. So I really think that applies, that if during the course of something like that, the board said, well, let's all go to the site.
Doesn't that have to be an open meeting?
Well, then, I think that's the point. We should announce it. The applicant should be able to be there. Any opponent should be able to be there, so there's no, it's all done in the open. I mean, we have 50 applications a year it's not practical what this says, or even possible. We'd have to have a meeting first, announce site visits, and then postpone everything a month. So that's never. But the lessons of that is, if you go alone. If you see someone else by chance, don't talk to them. If a neighbor comes out, look, sometimes it's unavoidable, but
More than three on the site? 3 of us?
go by yourself if you need to go, and if you see anyone, don't talk to them about the case. Never meet with an applicant alone. Never meet with an objector alone.
Or a neighbor, right?
Yeah, an objector, neighbor, when I say
Yeah,
objector.
how about going onto the property?
Well, I guess, as long as you're not trespassing.
I thought we were allowed to
Soon as you-
trespass.
Ring the bell. So they don't see me walking in the back of the house with the blueprints.
We've always been told we can walk the property
We should.
with the badges, yeah.
I'll
We should.
Well, let's clear it
I'll
up.
have I'll have to double check that. To my knowledge, I don't think by virtue of being a planning board member that you can just go on to.
Let 'em talk.
You can, yeah, I mean, my understanding is that being an appointed planning board member doesn't permit you to just go walk in someone's backyard necessarily.
Well, how can we site visit if it's in the backyard, what's being done? I'm saying this out of 30 years of going in the backyards.
Google it.
It's only been on the board now. That's
Well, I was thinking of you.
Well,
that's an important one for
well,
us.
I'll look into that. I mean,
That's important for us.
Is this something we could be sued for, or just cops would remove us? I don't mean that in jest.
I would think that it would be a common sense item that if it looks like the house is locked up, you wouldn't go into it, climb a fence and go in the yard.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I
no,
know
no.
that.
It's wide open and you're walking through.
Exactly.
Somebody would come out and
I mean,
say, leave, you just leave.
Yeah.
I mean, Tom's right.
That
You
was my
sorta-
point, Tom.
I mean, is anyone gonna get arrested?
It says right here under this meeting applicant, the court recognizes that board members need to visit the property.
Well, but that doesn't say you can trespass
It
on the
says
property.
You need to visit proposed development sites.
I-
We have them.
Yeah, I understand that, but that doesn't suggest that you can go climb their
Fred
fence and
and
go in their
City
backyard and swim in their
Fred.
pool and,
Fred Vernon.
and,
You
right.
don't have one, see Fred, you should have one.
So-
Steve, you have one?
Yeah, but
Fred Vernon.
I think Tom's right. I mean, you gotta, use a
Anybody
little
that doesn't
common,
have a card, see, what's her name?
you gotta use some common sense to go out of this stuff.
Let
So-
her get them, for you.
Streets empty and there's no cars and
Huh?
lots open and you walk on it.
I bet.
Yep.
You know
See
what?
Palmas,
I
you'll
did
get
that.
ID
No one
cards.
opened the door.
And then the other thing we're good about, I mentioned,
It was you.
Roger,
let's get out of
Roger's
here.
probably falling asleep because he's already heard it, but with the emails, and we're pretty good with that, like Palma will send out, here's the agenda, your plans are ready to pick up. Roger might send something out to everybody, that's fine, but, and we rarely, if ever, get into this, don't hit the whole reply all, and then everyone's replying, there's some email chain, that's a no, because it's technically, now you're constituting a meeting, but we don't do that, but like, again, a lot of common sense stuff, but the book is actually kind of helpful, and,
But if I have some,
Says don't put it in writing in an email if you're responding to something.
right, but in a case of, there's been occasions when I've emailed everybody and it wasn't about a specific case, so it doesn't matter if it's not about a specific case, right? It's about something going on at a meeting, or be sure to do this or that.
if it's, yeah, board business shouldn't be conducted outside of a public meeting with more than a quorum. So, you know,
Don't send any more emails.
Well, Steve sends me tree stuff to look at, I mean,
yeah,
it's
well,
nothing.
that's Steve sending you, that's two people.
I just leave it
I'm
alone.
okay with that.
Huh?
I just leave it alone.
Yeah, there, see, like Roger sent us he wanted to put he sent it to
Right.
two of us and Palmer. That's okay, because you're
Yeah,
not
but a lot of the
forming
stuff is to
Palmer.
everybody.
But it's one thing saying, here this is. It's
Right.
not,
A back and forth.
It's not a
I
back
see what
and
you're
forth.
saying.
Not
I
dialogue.
see it. Got it.
it's just conveying information.
It's
That's
not,
okay.
it's not a back and forth conversation.
Right.
Okay, like when you sent the tree ordinance out to go over to look at, it's something that we can all look at. but
It wasn't something to be discussed online.
exactly.
Here it is, and we're going to
Here
discuss it
is,
in a
we'll
meeting.
discuss it here, so everyone shouldn't be
That-
replying, I think we should do this, I think
Yeah,
we should do that.
that-
Then we're having a sort of a meeting.
Right, and when I ask for comments, that's comments are here, not outside of the meeting.
If in doubt, send it to me or Palma, we can disperse it.
Right. That's pretty much it. And everyone signed this, it looks like?
Yeah, there's 11 signatures on there, and you can have that back.
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
All right, I got three more things, and then someone make a motion to
I'll
adjourn.
make a motion.
Second. I'll
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.